Chapter 1061. You're saying something stupid again. Humans are constantly changing. If they don't change, they're not human. You should have been my most capable helper, but it was just a mistake. Ji Xuanri's face was filled with regret. It's not just a mistake. People who walk different paths cannot work together. Hua Sengzan shook his head. Forget it. I know I can't convince you, but I don't plan on punishing you. After all, you're the senior brother I admire the most. However, you'll have to make up for the trouble you've caused. Don't forget that Li Qingshan basically died by your hands. He could have fought alongside us. Ji Xuanri stood up and said to the palace master and Mingfei, I'll go visit father. First senior brother, everything might not go as you expect. Just as Ji Xuanri was about to step out of the hall, he heard Hua Sengzan's voice. He frowned slightly and glanced back. He smiled and stepped out of the hall. He had been taught to control everything since he was young. Even if there were some accidents, they were just small surprises in life. The palace master waved his hand and tapped between Hua Sengzan's eyebrows. Hua Sengzan shuddered. He felt like his last bit of consciousness was sinking into oblivion, being devoured by sword intent. He stared deeply at the palace master and stuttered, Palace master, you want to use the sword to control people, but do you know, if you are also being controlled by the sword, it's just becoming one with the sword. It doesn't matter who's controlling who, the palace master said indifferently and retracted his sword. Hua Sengzan collapsed on the ground, motionless. Mingfei frowned. I didn't think something like this would happen. The palace master said, this kid isn't a sword cultivator, and he's extremely intelligent. It's nothing strange that he could fool our eyes. However, it was still a mistake. He only left a sliver of consciousness, or he could have secretly transmitted it to Li Qingshan. Mingfei said, it's just a pity about the 3,000 sword forms. What we want is not just the 3,000 sword forms. Anyway, let's get rid of this problem first. It's very simple. Mingfei smiled coldly as a cold light flashed in her eyes. Hua Sengzan crawled to his feet slowly and shook his head firmly. He said apologetically, Chengzan knows his mistake. It's good that you know your mistake. Dong, dong, dong. A melodious bell rang from outside the hall. The coronation ceremony was about to begin. Cultivators walked out of the side halls around the Hall of Great Strength in 2s and 3s. The Ming Queen and the Dark Queen basically discovered each other at the same time. When their eyes met, there was undisguised hostility. The master of the Sword Collection Palace and the master of the Umbral sect stood behind them as they stared at each other coldly. The Chan Monastery of Devanaga had purposefully separated the Umbral sect from the Sword Collection Palace to avoid any conflicts. However, it was inevitable that they would meet again. Fellow Taoists, please come in. The celebration is about to begin. The unraging monk invited him with a smile. When he saw Hua Sengzan behind the Sword Collection Palace master, he felt rather puzzled. He had clearly not seen this person before. However, he did not take it to heart. On Great Buddha Mountain, neither side could afford to disrespect the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. The master of the Sword Collection Palace and the master of the Umbral sect both stepped into the hall. Very soon, all the invited cultivators arrived in the Hall of Great Strength. There were not a lot of people, only around a dozen or so. They all spoke softly, even directly communicating with their soul sense, which set off the emptiness and quietness of the majestic hall. As a result, the coronation ceremony was not particularly lively. Instead, it seemed extremely solemn and dignified. However, every single one of these people was a great cultivator that had undergone the third heavenly tribulation. Basically, all the powerful cultivators of the Green Province had gathered here. Even though they had purposefully concealed their auras, their presences still surged into the air when they gathered together. The 4 monk kings of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga received the guests in the center as hosts, while the 4 great cultivators of the Sword Collection Palace and the Umbral sect each occupied a corner of the hall, radiating with a cold, chilling aura. If others did not take the initiative to talk to them, they would never talk to anyone either. Unlike the Mist Province, none of the great cultivators from the sects of the Green Province left the 3 great sections. Aside from them, There were the great grandmasters of the Academy of Confucianism, Taoism, Dharma, and Moism. There were many of them, making them the most numerous. They discussed quietly. I heard that the Onewell Monk King isn't even 100 years old yet. How young? I've heard that she hasn't even reached 50 yet. That's unbelievable. Just how many years has it been since someone like that appeared in the world? She must be a reincarnated celestial too. Oh right, didn't a reincarnated celestial appear in the Clear River Prefecture a few years ago? Don't mention it. He's already dead. Hee, there are good and bad among celestials too. Yu Weiyang stood with his arms crossed. His face was pale from anger, and he said nothing. Jin Fugui asked with a smile, Old Yu, who are you angry at? Yu Weiyang glanced at the Golden Hawk commander. You're still as meddlesome as ever. Jin Fugui laughed aloud. He was not angry at all. I'm just showing concern for an old friend, so how can you call that meddlesome? If you're always so hot-tempered, I'm afraid you won't live past 1,000 years old. If I can't, then I'll go to the Azura realm. If you can't, then you can go to hell. All right. Let's hear it. If worst comes to worst, we'll work together and help you vent your anger. Do you know Li Qinggan? Yu Weiyang thought for a moment. Of course. He used to be my subordinate. Jin Fugui had a very deep impression of Li Qingshan. That kid has already played me twice. Yu Weiyang gritted his teeth. Li Qingshan had stood him up again. When Li Qingshan went to listen to the Zen Dharma conference, Yu Weiyang did not want to wait around Great Buddha Mountain, so he agreed to meet up with him at the Great General's estate after the Zen Dharma conference. He was ready to carry out the bait plan against the soaring Locust King. However, many days had passed since the Zen Dharma conference. Yu Weiyang had waited here and there, but Li Qingshan was nowhere to be seen. He was furious. The school of the military emphasized that military orders must be obeyed. If he's a disciple of the school of the military, I'll definitely kill him. Yu Weiyang ground his teeth. Of course, that was only if he could do it. Actually, Li Qingshan could not be blamed for not taking Great General Yu seriously. Now that little and had a new, more perfect plan, he no longer wanted to be some stupid bait. Originally, he planned on telling Yu Weiyang after drawing the sword in the Sword Collection Palace, but with so many things happening along the way, he completely forgot about it. Jin Fugui laughed aloud when he heard that. He glanced at the unraging monk nearby. Why don't you just teach him a lesson while the unraging monk isn't by his side? Otherwise, I'll teach him a lesson for you. He's a member of my Hawkwolf Guard after all. Yu Weiyang said, You? You might not be able to teach him a lesson right now. Jin Fugui did not feel like there was anything wrong with teaching a junior a lesson. The unraging monk was not a petty person either. He's undergone the third heavenly tribulation a long time ago. Even the Crown Prince of Xiqing almost died at his hands when he came all the way from the Dragon Province. What right do you have to teach him a lesson? Yu Weiyang hesitated, but he still failed to hold back his anger. What did you say? Chapter 1062. Jin Fugui doubted his ears. His impression of Li Qingshan remained the same as several decades ago. It was also because of Xiqing that the unraging monk had hurried over from the Chan Monastery of Devanaga all the way to save him. That brat is very fierce. It's already good enough that he doesn't teach us old fellows a lesson. How would I dare to teach him a lesson? Yu Weiyang couldn't help but sigh with emotion. What are the two uncles whispering about? Gu Yenying walked over. You said you're old and that you should have worn my clothes a long time ago, Jin Fugui said with a smile. Forget it, I hate gold. As Gu Yenying spoke, she looked at Wasungzan. She felt that he had changed a lot. He was very different from the little blossom in her memory. Moreover, it was a little strange for him to appear here. Wasungzan sensed something and turned around to smile at her. Gu Yenying smiled back, but she felt strange and distant. She thought about it and didn't go over. Maybe it wasn't a bad thing for him. At this moment, Ji Xuanri suddenly made his way towards the master of the Umbral Insect and the Dark Queen. This bold action made the hall suddenly fall silent. All the gazes gathered over. Everyone knew about the hatred between the two sections. Although Ji Xuanri was the crown prince of Qing province, he carried a sword on his back. Xian Ri greets the Dark Queen and the sect master. It's been many years since we last met, but the sect master's bearing is still the same as before. Ji Xuanri continued to smile warmly, as if he was not facing a great enemy of the Sword Collection Palace, but two seniors of his. His Highness, the Crown Prince, seems to be getting better by the day. The sect master of the mysterious dark sect nodded slightly and squeezed out a smile, which made him look even more gloomy. Crown Prince, didn't we just meet not long ago? Didn't you want to kill me? The Dark Queen stroked the cat in her arms. He looked at Ji Xuanri with disgust, and his words caused the atmosphere in the entire hall of great strength to freeze. Chu Lai King was currently conversing with the dauntless monk. When he heard that, he could not help but frown. Ji Xuanri became even more humble. You've misunderstood, Dark Queen. I definitely have no such intentions. Get lost. I feel disgusted just by looking at your face. The Dark Queen simply closed her eyes. It was not just to humiliate Ji Xuanri. The face and the name both made her think of the person she had lost. Ji Xuanri's smile stiffened slightly. He had originally wanted to come over and show off the magnanimity of the future King Chu. However, he never expected the Dark Queen to actually ignore the situation at all. She was not even afraid of offending Chu Lai King. He thought, what a crazy woman. Slut, don't be so shameless. Mingfei placed her hand on the hilt of her sword and shouted, Xianri, why bother with this slut? Hurry up and come over. The Dark Queen said, they really are mother and son after all. They're both disgusting. Amitabha. The dauntless monk called out the Buddhist name loudly, his voice shaking up the entire hall. He stepped forward to mediate. This is a tranquil land of Buddhism. Can the two princesses give this old monk some face and temporarily set aside their grievances? Live together peacefully for a period of time? Across the entire Green Province and even the entire world, there were not a lot of people who would not give the dauntless monk face, but there just happened to be two of them here, and they were two furious women. Mingfei did not seem to hear the dauntless monk at all. She sneered. Some sluts have lost their children. Seeing how we're united as mother and son, they'll obviously go mad with jealousy. The dauntless monk was helpless. If they don't give me face, then so be it. You dash. The Dark Queen widened her eyes and paled even more. This was the greatest pain she had ever experienced in her life. She said resentfully, I will definitely kill you. I will kill everyone in the Sword Collection Palace. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk looked at one another with bitter smiles. Originally, they wanted to discuss how to deal with the soaring Locust King after the ceremony. Now, even the ceremony was about to be ruined. They could not help but blame this Crown Prince Xianri for not picking the right time. All of you, shut up. Chu Lai King flew into a rage. A tremendous presence rushed into the air, and fierce winds whistled through the hall. With the King Chu's wrath, the Green Province shook up. Even great cultivators would be alarmed, but it was still useless. What? You're still going to protect this slut? She said she wanted to kill me. How laughable. A man who can't even protect his own child actually dares to order around. The Mingfei and the Dark Queen actually targeted Chu Lai King together. Perhaps this was the only language they had in common. Chu Lai King's chest heaved, clearly angered to the limit, but he was unable to vent his anger. Just when the situation had spiraled out of control, a voice suddenly rang out, Father, please calm down. However, the voice did not come from Ji Xuanri. Instead, it came from behind the hall. It was a woman's voice, ethereal and captivating. In a daze, everyone caught a whiff of the faint fragrance of sandalwood. They saw a woman walk over from behind the hall. She wore a moon-white kasaya, untainted by even a speck of dust. Her long, dark hair reached the ground, and her beauty was like that of a goddess. Her footsteps were as gentle as if she was levitating through the air. You are? Chu Lai King was slightly taken aback. In that moment, he experienced a profound feeling. That was the connection of fate, the connection of blood and flesh. One will, what did you say? The dauntless monk raised an eyebrow. Father? Did I hear it wrong? Fine. My ears seem to be particularly bad today. Jean Fugue communicated to Yu Weiyang beside him. I also doubt whether I heard it wrong or not. According to my knowledge, His Majesty the King Chu doesn't have a daughter like that. Hmm? Don't tell me that. Yu Weiyang seemed to think of something and exclaimed in surprise. The cultivators were surprised as well. They all discussed among themselves. She's one will. Sure enough, she's very young. But what's with father? Don't tell me he wants to recognize a foster father and mother after hearing about the Dark Queen's pain of losing her son? However, even the person who said that did not believe their own speculations. That was far too sudden. Buddhist disciples had always severed their ties with the secular world, and with her supreme talent, why would she need to seek connections? Is it coming? Gu Yenying smiled. Yenying, what do you know? Jean Fugui asked. You'll understand if you keep watching, Gu Yenying said with interest. Chu Lai King stared at little N. Thousands of possibilities also appeared in his head, but they were all eliminated one by one. In the very beginning, only a single name remained, the name that was both the most likely and the most impossible. He still found it rather hard to believe. You're Xian Yu. I've been called by that name before. Father still remembers it. Little N looked at Chu Lai King with a smile, overlapping with the figure in her memories. The Dark Queen held her breath the moment Little N walked out. Her eyes were locked onto her as her body trembled gently. A flush appeared on her pale face as she murmured, You're my Yu. Little N bowed slightly towards Chu Lai King and arrived before the Dark Queen. She held her hands gently. Mother, I've returned. It was time to take back everything she had lost. Chapter 1063. Xianwei. The Dark Queen's tears had already fallen like rain. She let go of the cat in her arms and hugged Little N firmly. She used all of her strength, afraid that this was just a dream. Meow. Xianwei landed on the ground gently and turned around, crouching beside them. She raised her head and looked at the mother and daughter embracing each other. She felt both happy and disappointed. Sorry, mother. I've made you wait. Little N gently stroked her back. She also felt warmth in her heart. For a moment, she felt like she was seeing an illusion. Their identities had been reversed, and she was no longer a child. One will, are you really Princess Xianwei? The dauntless monk asked in disbelief. He felt like his brain was not enough. She used to be. Little N's voice was calm, possessing the power to calm people down, making it difficult for them to doubt her. I don't believe you. You're lying, Ming Fei said loudly. She felt a powerful threat. Ji Xuanri was originally the only successor to the position of King of Chu, yet a powerful competitor had suddenly appeared. This would change many things, perhaps even everything. Bitch, how dare you? The Dark Queen was furious. Mother. Little N patted the Dark Queen's hand and shook her head at her. Afterwards, she said to Ming Fei, Is there something you need, Ming Fei? Xianwei is already dead, Ming Fei said firmly. Oh! How do you know? Little N asked. Everyone knows about this, Ming Fei said. Chu Lai King was slightly doubtful too. He had asked the school of Yin and Yang to perform many divinations, but they all said that Xuanyue's life force was already gone. How did she come back from the dead? Little N said, I did die once, but I was saved by someone. I came back to life again. Who saved you? I will definitely thank him greatly, the King of Chu asked. He's not a person of this world. He's already taken off and left. Little N raised her head slightly. Her gaze seemed to pass through the room and fly towards the distant horizon. Perhaps it was because she had heard him mention it too many times, but she also wanted to take a look beyond the 9 heavens. In the past, she did not care about these thoughts. You're lying, outsider. How's it possible to enter and leave this world freely? Ming Fei said. Yu Weiyang and Jean Fugui exchanged a glance. Those who were invited to the king-conferring ceremony were all existences who stood at the pinnacle of the 9 prefectures. They understood the power of the laws of heaven and earth the most. The 9 prefectures had long been devoured by the demon region. I don't know either, Little N said frankly. This was indeed illogical. Even for existences at the level of demon god Qiongqi. Descending once required a great deal of effort and would cause a huge commotion. The only explanation was that the brother ox of Green Mountain was a being of a higher level than Cheongchi. This was not something that these people could understand. One will, you've been hiding so much from me. So this is where your true inheritance lies. The dauntless monk came to a realization and let out a long sigh. At first, he was worried that little and had inherited the legacy of the Golden Cicada Spirit King. However, even the Golden Cicada Spirit King could not have made her go through 3 heavenly tribulations in a row in just a few decades. The ability to control 33 Buddhist treasures at the same time was not something that could exist in this world. Now that she had said so, everything made sense. That person didn't want me to reveal this. Don't tell me the person you're talking about is actually a bodhisattva? The dauntless monk's voice trembled slightly. He instinctively treated the person from beyond the heavens as a person of Buddhism. He felt like only bodhisattvas could freely traverse the various worlds, revive the dead, and grow flesh and bone, nurturing a prodigy of Buddhist cultivation like her. Little and said, he did mention the word bodhisattva. However, he was talking about the white-bone bodhisattva. And I never saw him reveal the appearance of a bodhisattva. Bodhisattvas redeem people through their myriad incarnations, so it makes sense that they don't want to reveal their true appearance. The dauntless monk was ravishing with joy. He felt a sense of deep veneration towards Little and who had seen a bodhisattva before. If all of this was real, then she was the chosen one. She was the hope of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, no, of all Buddhism in the world. He was also willing to believe that this was real. Compared to that, a measly position of Monk King was nothing. A series of clangs rang out from behind the grand hall. The 7 treasures Monk King gripped his staff firmly and was unable to hold back his excitement. His golden bracelet trembled. He had come with a decree to confer the title of Monk King to Little N, and he planned on persuading Little N again. However, when Little N went out to reunite with her family, she had asked him to wait here. He never thought he would actually hear such a startling secret. Having been defeated by Little N's 33 Buddhist treasures, he basically believed her more than anyone else. He repeated inside, so that's how it is. So that's how it is. I have to report this to the Imperial Preceptor. He has to get her to come to the Spirit Kingdom Temple. He has to get her to come to the Spirit Kingdom Temple. Amitabha. The Buddha is merciful. The 4 guardian deities brought their palms together and chanted the name of Buddha, bowing towards Little N. They were not bowing to her, but to the faintly discernible bodhisattva behind her. Immediately, the grand hall was enveloped in a mysterious, solemn, and religious atmosphere. The cultivators looked at one another. Those who were not Buddhists struggled to understand this feeling. If Little N really was the successor of a bodhisattva, then she was basically like a savior to the Buddhist disciples of this world. The bodhisattva must have enlightened Little N so that she could illuminate this world. So that's how it is. That's the only explanation for their cultivation speed and their unbelievable power. Though, that probably isn't some bodhisattva, Gu Yenying thought. She had seen Li Qingshan's demon form and Little N's skeletal form. She found it very difficult to believe that they were the handiwork of a bodhisattva. Under this atmosphere, Mingfei was unable to harp on this topic anymore. She questioned, all right, even if what you said is true, why did you only reveal yourself now? I remember that you were already a disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga many years ago. I was harmed by someone. My soul was damaged, and my memories were damaged. In the beginning, I couldn't even speak. Even though there were some fragments of my memories, I couldn't confirm it. Only afterwards did I completely recover my memories. I've made you wait, Mother, Little, and apologized. Who harmed you? Was it this woman? The Dark Queen pointed at Mingfei and asked. Little and gazed deeply at Mingfei. Her empty eyes actually made Mingfei feel a sliver of fear. That was not the gaze of looking at a person, but more like gazing at emptiness. Chu Liking frowned. If Xianyu really did accuse Mingfei of being the murderer, then the problem would be severe. Little and shook her head gently. I'm not too sure either. After all, I was still young back then. But that's not important. What's important is that I'm back, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. Although the Dark Queen struggled to quell her resentment, she did not want to pursue the matter right now and ruin the joy of their reunion. No matter who the murderer is, I will make them pay the price. Chu Lai King let out a sigh of relief. Basically, he had acknowledged Little Anne's identity indirectly. Even without the profound connection of his closest kin, he did not believe there was a need for her to pretend to be his daughter. Thank you, father. Little Anne bowed and turned around. She said to the head of the Sword Collection Palace, Palace Master, you can take out the Xieji's horn now, right? Did I lie at all? Chapter 1064. Immediately, everyone's gazes gathered on the master of the Sword Collection Palace. His face sank slightly, and he extended his right hand from behind his back. He held a curved horn. From the moment Little Anne appeared, the master of the Sword Collection Palace had silently taken out the Xieji's horn. He never expected her to discover it. This was no longer due to her powerful cultivation, but also due to her sharp judgment. He could vaguely sense that this would be an unexpectedly powerful enemy. Most of the great cultivators present knew about the wondrous effects of the Xieji's horn, which further proved the truth of what Little Anne had said. Their initial sliver of doubt had all been dispelled now. Sure enough, the new generation replaces the old. Now she's a true prodigy. Jean Fugue sighed. Princess Xianwei, the Unravel Monk King, and the unbelievable successor of the Bodhisattva combined made Ji Xuanri, the crown prince of the Green Province, pale in comparison. He could already foresee that her existence would definitely influence the overall situation of the world. Amitba. Congratulations to Your Majesty the King of Chu, congratulations to the Dark Queen. The family has been reunited, and the pearl has been recovered. The dauntless monk smiled. In the past few years, my daughter has been so cute and taken care of me. I'm extremely grateful. I almost forgot to congratulate the Chan Monastery of Devanaga for gaining another monk king. The fierce king of Chu also smiled delightedly. This had been a knot in his heart as well. Then congratulations to you too. The dauntless monk and Chu Lai King exchanged glances and smiled. The relationship between the Chan Monastery of Devanaga and the King of Chu's estate was basically a win-win situation. This was good for both of them. The cultivators all congratulated Chu Lai King and the dauntless monk before congratulating Little Anne. Ming Fei's expression constantly changed. The master of the Sword Collection Palace closed his eyes as if he was thinking about something. Little Anne said nothing, only nodding with a smile, but no one would find him rude. Everything had developed according to his expectations. She had not let him down after all. From now onwards, her will could represent the Chan Monastery of Devanaga and even influence the entire cultivation community of the Green Province. Whether it was killing the Soaring Locust King or assisting the Golden Cicada Spirit King in ascending, she could do it with ease. The only pity was, he was not here. Sister Xianyu, welcome back. It's great that you're still alive. This way, all the misunderstandings can be resolved. Ji Xuanri walked forward. His face was filled with a warm smile. If someone who didn't know what was going on saw it, did he really think that it was because of sibling love? Little Anne was about to answer when his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He turned to look outside the Hall of Great Strength. Ji Xuanri was no longer in his eyes. Didn't I warn you? Piss off. Don't disgust us. The Dark Queen's voice was filled with delight. Damn bitch, Ji Xuanri thought. A sliver of anger flashed through his eyes, not just because of what the Dark Queen had said, but because her appearance had disrupted his entire plan. Little Anne didn't do it to humiliate Ji Xuanri, but he sensed a familiar aura approaching. He's finally here. So slow. You didn't even see my performance. He seems very angry. What happened? A beam of light whizzed over from the northern horizon, heading straight for the peak of Great Buddha Mountain. With a boom, it struck outside the Hall of Great Strength like a rock. Li Qingshan stood in the rising dust and bellowed, Ji Xuanri, get your ass out here. His voice rumbled like thunder, echoing across Great Buddha Mountain. Who is it? The cultivators in the Hall of Great Strength were all surprised. Who was Ji Xuanri? He was the crown prince of the Green Province, the future King Chu. Only the Dark Queen was bold enough to humiliate him to his face. Who else was bold enough to tell him to piss off? However, Ji Xuanri began laughing. He communicated with Ming Fei, "Mother, our esteemed elder has arrived." Finally, a portion of the plan was back on track. Ming Fei sneered too. Originally, she thought she would have to do something else to infuriate him, but in the end, he was even more brainless than she imagined. "Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan, Great Buddha Mountain is where you die. The people who kill you will be your fellow disciples." Li Qingshan stepped into the hall of great strength. The golden tiles beneath his feet shattered, and his black hair drifted backwards. He raised his thick eyebrows and pursed his lips. He was furious. Even though he did not give off any aura, he possessed his own intimidating bearing. All the cultivators felt a fishy wind blowing against their faces. It was as if a ferocious tiger had barged into the crowd and was looking for prey. When they met his gaze, they felt a sense of wariness. He really is vicious and powerful. "I finally believe he can kill, is bold enough to kill the crown prince of Xiqing." Jin Fugue was stunned at first before sighing in amazement at Yueyang. "This kid is getting bolder and bolder. I'd like to see how he deals with this today." However, Yueyang was rather worried. Although he had been stood up twice, they were still fellow cultivators. He did not want Han Qiongji to be sad either. Li Qingshan glanced around and saw Hua Sengzan in the corner. Seeing how he was fine, as if he was unharmed, he eased up slightly and strode over. There was a flash before him, and Ji Xuanri blocked his way again. He asked with a smile, "Qingshan, what business do you have with me?" Li Qingshan was no longer swayed by his words. He spat out 2 words, "Piss off." Ji Xuanri shrugged and backed to one side. Mingfei barked, "How dare you? How dare you offend the crown prince? What do you think your punishment is?" She turned around and said to the dauntless monk, "Dauntless abbot, is this how the Chan monastery of Devanaga teaches their disciples?" "Qingshan, what's wrong? What happened?" The unraging monk grabbed Li Qingshan's shoulder and asked frantically, "Master, this is a matter between me and the Sword Collection Palace. There's no need for you to interfere." Li Qingshan gently pushed the unraging monk away and took a step forward. He said to the master of the Sword Collection Palace, "Hand him to me, and we'll mind our own business, or else." The master of the Sword Collection Palace interrupted him. "Or else what? Chengzan is a disciple of our Sword Collection Palace. How can we allow you to act so recklessly? Little Hua, don't be afraid. With me here today, I'll slaughter anyone who touches a hair on you." Li Qingshan surged with murderousness. "Li Qingshan, take a good look at this place," the dauntless monk said furiously. "Qingshan, this is a peaceful place of Buddhism. No one will be injured here, so you might as well explain everything." Little and walked over and grabbed Li Qingshan's hand, expressing that he was not completely helpless. Li Qingshan made up his mind and considered it slightly. His priority right now was still to ensure Hua Sengzan's safety. Hua Sengzan was willing to take great risks for his friend, so he could not let him be harmed no matter what. However, before he could say anything, Hua Sengzan spoke first. "Qingshan, we've been friends for nothing. Do you really have to kill me?" "Little Hua, what did you say?" Li Qingshan was alarmed. The Hua Sengzan before him had become extremely unfamiliar. "Forget it. If that's the case, I'll announce your scheme to the world and let them judge you. Not only has this person become a demon king, but he's even colluding with the demon domain in an attempt to topple the Green Province. The soaring Locust King was only able to escape because of his assistance, so please kill him together, fellow cultivators." Chapter 1065. Green smoke curled up into the air, and the lofty Buddha statue stood high above. Its eyes were slightly shut, completely unfazed. The murals depicted arhats and goddesses, as well as the living beings of the 8 tribes, all in different expressions. They were lifelike, overlooking everything in the hall. "Please punish him together." The 4 words echoed through the hall like a bolt of lightning, landing in everyone's hearts. They all looked at Li Qingshan. Demon King. Releasing the soaring Locust King. Colluding with the demon domain. As long as any single one of these accusations were true, it would be enough to kill him right here and now. Li Qingshan stood proudly unfazed. His heart sank. He was not worried about these slander and accusations. He was worried about Hua Sengzan. Even when his life was threatened, he believed that Hua Sengzan would never say something like that unless his mind was under control. Is this the secret of the sword? The Sword Collection Palace. Little N wanted to speak up for him, but he saw Li Qingshan's face sink. He said nothing. He did not want to argue with his friend. Now that this situation had developed to this point, there was nothing he could do about it. He had not spent all these years of arduous cultivation to bicker with others. As a result, Little N let go of his hand and silently retreated to one side. Ji Xuanri smiled. Sister Xianwei, with your current identity and status, you should draw a clear line between you and people like that. Little N smiled at him. She was devastatingly beautiful. Ji Xuanri was stunned. He was speechless. Fellow Hua, you said my disciple colluded with the demon domain and released the soaring locust king. Do you have any proof? The unraging monk asked. Unraging monk, it's already come to this, yet you still want to protect him? If you don't believe me, then please ask him to release his aura. Let's see whether it's demon chi or not. Hua Sengzan was aggressive. His face was filled with regret and helplessness. He had used his intelligence and wisdom to put Li Qingshan to death. The unraging monk frowned. This was indeed the greatest flaw. Li Qingshan's cultivation was without a doubt that he was a demon king. The various twists and turns in this matter were difficult to explain to others. Once it was exposed, it was inevitable that people would believe him slightly if he colluded with the demon domain, which would be a huge scandal for the monastery. Gu Yenying frowned slightly. There was something wrong with Xiao Hua's behavior. Chu Lai King said, Li Qingshan, release your aura. As for whether or not you colluded with the infernal domain, you can use the Xieji's horn to verify it. This king will prove your innocence. There's no need. I'm not innocent, and I don't need any innocence. Li Qingshan refused indifferently. He was already tired of following the plot set up by others. Wasn't it enough to be played to this extent? So what if he could prove he was not colluding with the infernal domain in the end? Would he be able to save Hua Sengzan? Perhaps he had already lost this friend forever. You. Chu Lai King raised an eyebrow. He never expected him to refuse so straightforwardly. In other words, you admit you're a demon king, colluding with the demon domain and releasing the soaring locust king? Mingfei communicated with him at the same time. Kid, how does it feel to be betrayed? You brought this upon yourselves. Originally, all you had to do was refine the soul-switching sword obediently. Li Qingshan did not answer. He remained silent like a rock. Hua Sengzan continued, and I even know a great secret about this person. He has another identity. Li Qingshan raised his hand and pointed directly at Hua Sengzan. Right when everyone thought he would retort angrily and threaten him, he said seriously, this person is my friend. I want to take him away. Those who stand in my way will die. Hua Sengzan shuddered inside. He met Li Qingshan's eyes, only to see that there was no hatred or blame in his black eyes, only apologetic and concerned. Li Qingshan, you won't be taking anyone away today. Mingfei glanced backwards. Qingzan, what other identity does he have? Tell us. She was rather curious as well. Just what other secrets did Li Qingshan have yet to expose? The sight of friends killing each other sure was touching. Qingshan. Hua Sengzan's voice was hoarse. His expression twisted as he struggled. His handsome face immediately became rather vicious. His body slowly bent, and he knelt on the ground. A sliver of determination flashed through his eyes as he gritted his teeth. A strand of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, dripping onto the golden brick. Everyone was stunned. The dauntless monk was alarmed. Seeing blood in the grand hall was extremely ominous. Qingzan. Li Qingshan's eyes immediately reddened. He wanted to go over, but Mingfei blocked his way again. Li Qingshan, stop putting on an act. If you want to silence me, you'll have to get through me first. Then she communicated secretly, you sure can put up with it. Though, looks like I really can't spare him. Li Qingshan, I can give you another chance. If you kneel and admit your guilt right now, I can still spare his life. Otherwise, Li Qingshan took a step forward, and thousands of golden bricks shattered. The grand hall shook. He swung his fist. "Qingshan, you mustn't." The unraging monk stopped him loudly. Everyone else was surprised. He's actually bold enough to attack. A hint of a smile flashed through Mingfei's eyes. Had he finally run out of patience? Right from the beginning, she had never thought about proving that Li Qingshan was colluding with the demon domain. All she needed to do was infuriate him. He had used the methods of a demon king to attack her, the princess, in front of everyone. Just this crime alone was punishable by death. With a clang, the sword left its sheath. The blade trembled and turned into nothingness, but it produced a strange hum. The space there rippled, overlapping with one another. The Sword of Clear Void, one of the 10 famed swords of the Sword Collection Palace. It possessed an extremely wondrous power. It could form a world of its own for defense, while it could split space for offense. In that moment, Mingfei seemed to leave the Grand Hall and stand in a different world. She sneered at Li Qingshan's incoming fist and communicated secretly. "When I faced that bitch the Dark Queen that day, I was only intentionally hiding my strength. Do you really think you can harm me?" Mingfei suddenly discovered that Li Qingshan's eyes had turned red. It was not a bloodshot red, but a clear, scarlet red. His long hair fluttered like fire, and his face became extremely unfamiliar. A pair of curved ox horns grew on his head, engraved with the 2 words, North Moon. In an instant, a demonic aura soared into the sky, causing everyone's expression to change. Even the majestic golden Buddha statue dimmed. The nightmare tiger's demonic eye. Mingfei's breathing halted. She became dazed, and she could not help but feel a hint of fear. Strength of the earth. Mingfei widened her eyes. The incoming fist rapidly expanded, filling her entire field of vision like a mountain. Tremors of the ox demon. Black cracks crisscrossed, and the overlapping space shattered. The Sword of Clear Void materialized before shattering loudly. Fury of the tiger demon. Li Qingshan let out a furious roar, and his fist landed heavily on Mingfei's face. How could this be? Mingfei's face was filled with disbelief. Then, her beautiful face shattered like the clear sky sword. The vibrating power spread through her entire body, turning her into a bloody mist. Thousands of blood droplets swept past everyone's eyes, splashing onto the Buddha murals and dyeing the Hall of Great Strength red. Chapter 1066. Li Qingshan's furious roar shook up the Grand Hall, echoing through the entire Great Buddha Mountain. A small, white sword flew out from the thousands of droplets of blood. It was also sent flying by the punch, spinning as it stabbed into the lotus pedestal beneath the Buddha statue. The small sword was semi-transparent, and the figure of a woman who resembled Mingfei could be vaguely seen. It was Mingfei's sword infant. Li Qingshan pulled back his fist, but he did not take another glance at it. "Who are you?" Mingfei was terrified. She recalled Hua Sengzan's unspoken secret. Crack! A black crack appeared on the sword infant. The sword infant trembled a few times, but it was unable to stop the crack from spreading. It enveloped the entire sword before shattering loudly. Dazzling light shot out from every single door and window. A circular wave of air erupted from the top of Great Buddha Mountain, sweeping over 1,000 kilometers away. The light was like the sea as sword chi surged. All the great cultivators unleashed their defenses, blocking the terrifying power of the sword infant shattering. Buddhist chants suddenly rang out. The Grand Hall was enveloped in golden light. The protective formation had already been activated. The shockwave dispersed. The sword shattered, the person died, and the infant shattered. "Those who stand in my way shall die. I will keep my word." The bell at the back of the hall continued to ring. The same bell seemed to appear in the heads of all the great cultivators. They were filled with disbelief, basically doubting everything before them to be a dream. A renowned greatsword cultivator had been killed by a single punch just like that. Jin Fugui widened his eyes and opened his mouth slightly, completely unaware of what had just happened. Only now did he realize how laughable and dangerous it was for him to say that he wanted to teach Li Qingshan a lesson. Yueyang was stunned as well. Even though he already knew that Li Qingshan was hiding a lot of strength, he never expected him to be such a colossal figure. Suddenly, he recalled what the Azura King had said to him after the battle in the Azura field. For some reason, I just feel like I'll be in danger of being killed too if I were to fight this kid. How strange. The Dark Queen was stunned too. She was filled with resentment towards Mingfei, but everything had happened far too quickly. Before she could even feel the joy of revenge, she was instead filled with disbelief. Gu Yenying smiled faintly and sighed with emotion. Had the wild youth under the pine tree finally reached the steppe? Qing province spanned 30,000 miles, and Jianghu was only a corner. This was what she had told him back then, and to him now, Qing province was only a corner. The dauntless monk shut his eyes painfully. Was it another golden cicada spirit king? No, it was a fiendish demon that was even more terrifying than the golden cicada spirit king. Even the current golden cicada spirit king would not dare to brazenly attack and kill Mingfei in front of so many mighty cultivators in the Hall of Great Strength. I am North Moon, Li Qingshan said proudly. Hua Sengzan would rather bite his tongue off than reveal the secret. Let him announce it to the world. He felt great delight inside. From this moment onwards, there was no need for him to hide carefully anymore. There was no need for him to be secretive anymore. Li Qingshan was the North Moon, and the North Moon was Li Qingshan. If there really was a path to the 9 heavens, then he would use this place as the starting point. North Moon Demon King. These 4 words appeared in the heads of all the great cultivators. As it turned out, the North Moon that the Dragon King of the Sea had been pursuing for thousands of kilometers had been hiding his identity the entire time. As it turned out, he was not dead. The blood that had splattered across the ground was scarlet and dazzling, making them shiver. Many of them were no stronger than Mingfei. Standing in the Hall of Great Strength was like sharing a room with a vicious tiger as mortals. They experienced this long-awaited feeling of terror once again. It was the threat of death. Qingshan, you, no wonder. No wonder. The unraging monk gazed at the scarlet-haired, scarlet-eyed figure. His smile was suddenly filled with bitterness. With this, all of Li Qingshan's illogicality could be explained, but it was the explanation he did not want the most. Master, I hope you don't regret accepting me as your disciple. Whether I'm a demon king or a demon king, I'm still me. Li Qingshan pressed his chest and said sincerely. What's the point of saying this now? The unraging monk let out a long sigh. Oh, my damned disciple. Even if I'm willing to believe you, what about the others? Perhaps you don't need anyone else to believe you anymore. Li Qingshan. Shu Lai King flew into a rage. He slammed his palm towards Li Qingshan as hard as he could. In that moment, the scenery and the surroundings twisted and collapsed. The great cultivators were only affected by the residual force, but they all felt like they could not stand steadily anymore. Li Qingshan only felt like the world had turned upside down and twisted. The Buddhist murals in the surroundings all became grotesque and bizarre, seeming to be mocking, seeming to be sorrowful, seeming to be mocking. He thought, he really is the lord of the Green Province after all. The power in his palm strike is definitely no weaker than the Dragon King of the Seas. However, that's all there is to it. His eyes flashed. When he saw through the grotesque and bizarre murals, he struck out with his palm. Bang! The 2 palms collided, and the distorted world returned to normal. Shu Lai King was shocked and furious. He stared at Li Qingshan in disbelief. The power of his palm strike could even collapse a mountain, yet Li Qingshan did not budge at all. He was like a mountain forged from steel, unshakable. Instead, an unstoppable force appeared, accompanied by a strange power of tremors. Li Qingshan had never lost to anyone when it came to a contest of strength. Even if the Dragon King of the Sea was present, it would be the same. Your Majesty the King of Chu, you are so noisy and your mouth is a mess. I don't know how you endure it, but I can't. Li Qingshan shrugged his shoulders. I'm sorry, little N. I ruined your plan. He then smiled and said to Ji Xuanri, and yours. Die. Ji Xuanri roared and pulled out the soul-extinguishing sword. He was about to take revenge for Mingfei, but just as he took a step forward, a white sword tip pierced through his chest. The 3 protective treasures on his body did not have any effect. He did not even have the slightest warning. He turned his head and said while gritting his teeth, "Ji, Xian, you. It's okay, as long as you're happy." Little and said. Her sneak attack was even more fatal than Li Qingshan's attack. "I'm afraid you'll be unhappy. This guy is your brother, right?" Li Qingshan said. "He's all right. I've hated him since I was young. I can't wait for him to die." Little and pulled out the Buddha slaying sword. Ji Xuanri collapsed on the ground. He sensed the aura of death permeate the air. His widened eyes were filled with confusion and terror. "What's going on? I've only been struck once. I don't want to die." The samadhi flames of white bone erupted from his wound and swallowed him instantly. In the moment before his death, he suddenly understood what Wasungzan had said. "Everything might not be as you expect." Xuanri. Xu Liking was utterly furious. This was the successor he had placed all of his hopes on. One will. The expressions of the four monk kings all changed drastically. The shock inside was even greater than when Li Qingshan killed Ming Fei. This sinister, strange method did not seem like a Buddhist cultivation method no matter how they looked at it. Instead, it was filled with blasphemy, even more so than demon folk. Chapter 1067. Behind Xiao An's alluring beauty, white bones and skeletons could be vaguely seen. From the moment Li Qingshan transformed into North Moon and killed Ming Fei, there was no room for negotiation anymore. It was impossible for the Chan Monastery of Devanaga to just stand by, so let's face it together. Whether it's fortune or misfortune, I'll bear half of it for you. Father, please leave. Little and drifted over and swung down with her sword. After witnessing the terrifying power of the Buddha slaying sword, Xu Liking was afraid of being struck by the blade. All he could do was pull back and retreat. He said in anguish, "Xianwei, I'm your father." Little and said apologetically, "Father, there's nothing I can do to repay you for raising me up. However, as long as my path exists, I can only stubbornly persist." "Killing your brother and your father is your repayment, your path?" Xu Liking questioned. In the blink of an eye, great joy had turned into great sorrow. Even with Xu Liking's willpower, he found it rather difficult to endure. Little and closed her eyes. There was nothing she could say. Possessing a human heart and taking back everything from the past meant enduring various restraints and even pain, but she also needed to make a choice. Originally, Li Qingshan could not be bothered to waste his breath, but he could not help but argue for her right now. "So what if I killed my brother? That kid, Ji Xuanri, is putting on an act, but he's full of evil tricks. He's even worse than his mother. Killing him is the right thing to do. Otherwise, when he becomes King Chu in the future, he'll definitely bring disaster to the Green Province. As his father, you're also responsible. We've helped you out greatly, you know? As for killing your father, don't you slander us. We haven't killed you yet, so of course, we don't plan on killing you either. Am I right, Little Anne?" Little Anne had no idea whether to laugh or cry. That was not without reason, but since when did someone kill someone else's wife and child and claim that they were helping them? That last sentence was as mocking as it could get. Xu Liking basically lost his mind from anger. His hatred surged. Everything had to be attributed to this wretched demon. "I don't care if you're Li Qingshan or North Moon, human or demon. Don't even think about leaving Great Buddha Mountain alive today. Everyone, what are you waiting for?" Xu Liking gave an order, and his words were the law. "Li Qingshan, I originally thought you had a Buddhist nature and wisdom, which is why I allowed you to cultivate in the monastery. You've actually made a terrible mistake. Not only did you conceal your identity as a demon, but you've even committed a massacre in the temple. But you also for Taoism, you, Li, and Li, you, Shan, and..." The dauntless monk swung his hand and powered the protective formation, enveloping the grand hall in golden light and sealing off all the doors, turning it into a golden cage. He glanced at Xiaoan and sighed again. The dauntless monk's hopes for her were so great that they even surpassed the unraging monk's hopes for Li Qingshan, but in the end, it was all for naught, which left him extremely disappointed. Cut the bullshit. Right and wrong will naturally be clear. Li Qingshan waved his hand, and the wildflower blade appeared in his hand. Sensing his raging battle intent, the wildflower blade's spirit roared out excitedly, "Kid, are you finally going to start a massacre? Do you think there's still a future for you? Fearless guardian king." The dauntless monk bellowed out furiously. His Buddhist light shone brightly, turning into a fearless guardian king. At the same time, two other guardian kings rose up from the ground, falling into the guardian king demon subduing formation, but they left behind a huge gap. Unraging! The three guardian kings looked at the unraging monk together. The unraging monk closed his eyes before suddenly snapping them open again. With a flash of light, he turned into the unraging guardian king and filled in the gap. The four guardian kings fell into a formation together and bellowed out at the same time, "Guardian King Demon Subduing." Their voices rumbled like thunder. The golden light condensed into a huge golden mountain, crushing down on Li Qingshan. It suddenly came to a halt a meter away from his head. That's not necessarily true. Li Qingshan supported the golden mountain with a single hand. The strength of the earth flowed out endlessly from beneath his feet, but the golden mountain was even heavier than regular mountains. The four guardian kings worked together and pressed down inch by inch. With a thought, Li Qingshan used the gravity of the earth. The golden mountain immediately became weightless, and the four guardian kings lost their footing. "Go!" Li Qingshan raised his hands and pushed as hard as he could, sending the golden mountain flying towards the majestic Buddha statue in the hall. The Buddha statue suddenly opened its eyes and stared at Li Qingshan. It extended its hand and grabbed the golden mountain. The mountain that was as heavy as a mountain seemed to be weightless in the Buddha's hand. The Buddha stood up slowly, becoming even taller than the four guardian kings. It had gathered millions of worshippers and the condensed power of belief over 10,000 years. The Buddha strode towards Li Qingshan with heavy footsteps. At the same time, the arhats, maidens, and protector Jialan on the murals in the surroundings all appeared. Many of them gave off the aura of the third heavenly tribulation. Li Qingshan vaguely recalled that this was also the handiwork of the five absolutes immortal. In that moment, the Grand Hall seemed to become a Buddhist kingdom on earth, rippling with boundless, golden light. In order to clean up their sect, the Chan Monastery of Devanaga had already done everything they could. Jin Fugue and Yu Weiyang exchanged glances and drew their arcane treasures and weapons. They were also honored guests of the King Chu's estate. No matter how they viewed Li Qingshan, they could only treat him as an enemy right now. The other great cultivators of the academy all stepped forward and unleashed their supreme techniques. A great grandmaster of Moism unleashed a few puppet kings, while the great grandmasters of the famed school prepared the mantra of many words. "Wretched demon, today is the day you die. When you killed the disciples of my school of Confucianism, did you think this day would come?" An old man with a long beard barked. He wore a set of yellow scholarly robes, clearly a great grandmaster of Confucianism. "Haha, you need to be careful. We don't know each other well. When we fight later, I won't show any mercy. I'll probably end up killing another disciple of Confucianism," Li Qingshan smiled. "You're already at death's door, yet you're still so stubborn." Even in the chaotic Mist province, the king of Southern Yu could command a group of demonic cultivators, let alone the strict order of the Green province here. It had reigned for an even longer period of time than the Great Xia Empire, which allowed the King Chu's estate to possess supreme authority. With a single order from the Chu Lai king, all cultivators had to obey. However, this was all within the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Otherwise, everyone would have to consider just how great of a price they were willing to pay. "What a grand spectacle," Li Qingshan said. This spectacle really did live up to the name of the blooming blade at the end of the road. It seemed a little like he was at the end of the road, but before he saved Wasungzan, he would never back down. However, the master of the Sword Collection Palace remained in a corner of the hall the entire time, guarding beside Wasungzan. Even when Mingfei and Ji Xuanri were killed, he did not move at all, giving Li Qingshan no opportunity at all. "Aren't you going to avenge those two bastards?" Li Qingshan asked. "You're dead for sure, so why do you need me? You're looking for an opportunity to save this traitor, aren't you?" The master of the Sword Collection Palace was filled with hatred. If it were not for Hua Sengzhan's warning and he allowed Li Qingshan to refine the soul-switching sword, the situation would not have developed like this. The Sword Collection Palace would not have lost 2 great sword cultivators for some reason, causing his entire plan to fail. If you touch a single hair on him, I'll make your entire family die, Li Qingshan said. Chapter 1068. He swung the sword with heavenly reliance, revealing his abilities. There were no complicated moves, only determination to cut through everything. At this moment of life and death, Hua Sengzhan's eyes recovered their clarity. His mind was unprecedentedly clear. The light from the sword filled his vision, but the figure in white remained in his mind. He smiled. He still could not forget her after all. You're looking to die. Li Qingshan's eyes almost popped out of his head. He spread his fingers and reached out, using the gravity of the earth. Hua Sengzhan immediately rose into the air, flying towards Li Qingshan. However, he was not as fast as heavenly reliance. Just when he was about to be cleaved in half, he extended a jade folding fan and blocked heavenly reliance. The atmospheric winds and the light clashed violently, kicking up violent gusts of wind that rumbled through the hall. Gu Yanning arrived with the wind, arriving first despite having set out later. Her white clothes drifted about. Commander Gu. Hua Sengzhan widened his eyes and stared at her deeply. Gu Yanning, do you want to help this wretched demon as well? Don't forget who you are. The palace master glared at Gu Yanning, and his gaze condensed into an invisible sword intent. This person has publicly exposed the wretched demon's evil deeds. You should be rewarding him. Why must you kill him? Gu Yanning's eyes turned into a hawk's eyes as if they could see through everything. She nullified the invisible sword intent, which made her seem even more valiant. He's a member of my Sword Collection Palace now. I have my own ways of dealing with him. Do you really think you can stop me? The palace master slapped the hilt of his sword, and heavenly reliance turned into a streak of light as it shot off. Sword manipulation had always been the foundation of cultivators of the sword. After it left his hand, heavenly reliance was like a serpent that had plunged into the ocean. It was even faster than when it was in his hand, slashing towards Hua Sengzhan viciously. Scorching wind hell. However, Gu Yanning seemed to have been expecting this. Before the flying sword had even shot out, she had already unfurled her jade folding fan. With a gentle wave, rolling hot winds whistled and swallowed Hua Sengzhan, sucking him into the scorching wind hell. Self-created domain. The heavenly sword missed and flew back into the palace master's hand. He pointed the tip at Gu Yanning. Gu Yanning, I'd like to see how long you can last. If you don't hand over Hua Sengzhan, don't even think about leaving. Hua Sengzhan knew far too many secrets of the Sword Collection Palace. He had to die. Very long. Gu Yanning smiled. Thank you, Commander Gu, Li Qingshan said. You're welcome. This is my friendship with Little Flower. It has nothing to do with you. But you better do something. Gu Yanning waved her hand without even turning her head. She waved her jade folding fan, stirring up a hot wind to melt the whistling sword chi. A self-created domain and the manifestation of hell. Such a move was indeed powerful, but it also required a great deal of effort. It was impossible to maintain it for a long time, not to mention the fact that he had to block the attack of a great sword cultivator. All right. Li Qingshan no longer had any worries. He looked around at the hostile faces around him and the boundless Buddhist kingdom that glowed with golden light. Pride immediately filled his chest, and he raised his blade. I'd like to see what you're capable of. If you end up dying under my blade, don't even think about regretting it in the afterlife. Come, wretched demon. Don't you dare speak so arrogantly. The first to strike was a pale-faced, slightly plump, middle-aged man in the distance. He was the Grand Master from the famed sect. He formed a seal with his hands and called out, "Freeze!" The simple word contained endless power. It was infused with his entire life's worth of cultivation, and it was the famed incantation of the famed sect, the freeze incantation. The Grand Master smiled calmly. I've already frozen this demon. Please kill him, Grand Masters. He was rather disapproving inside, You really don't know your place. Even if you have the supreme strength to kill Mingfei with a single punch, even a demon king will die here with so many of us working together. Do you think you'll be able to overturn the situation? Li Qingshan shuddered. He was immediately immobilized. I'll lend you a hand, fellow. In a battle of life and death, even a split second of hesitation could determine life and death. Guardian King Demon subduing. The dauntless monk bellowed out, and the 4 Guardian Kings struck together. Under the effects of the Guardian King Demon subduing formation, the 4 powers combined into a single strike, turning into a colossal Vajra that smashed down. Break! Li Qingshan bellowed out. It was the Tiger Demon's fierce roar, breaking free from the freeze incantation in a single stroke and blocking the falling Vajra with his blade. Boom! The ground cracked and collapsed, and the great hall shook. The Grandmaster paled and could not help but take a step back. He never thought his freeze incantation would actually be broken so quickly, and the tiger's roar seemed to ring out right beside his ear, making him dizzy and suffering from a backlash. Before the tiger's roar had even subsided, the dragon's roar rang out again. At first, it was as thin as a thread, but in the blink of an eye, it blanketed the surroundings like a soaring dragon, directly pouring into his head. His blood surged, and he took another step back. The chant of Devanaga. The dauntless monk was alarmed. All he saw was Little and open her mouth slightly, and the dragon's roar rolled out endlessly. It was the supreme cultivation technique of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, the chant of Devanaga. Right now, she was so dignified. She was clearly still the outstanding disciple he had high hopes for, or even the successor of the Bodhisattva. Her white monk robes drifted about, and she no longer gave off the slightest sense of blasphemy. The chant of Devanaga was even more wondrous and filled with zen. Even the monk kings could not help but admire her. One will, oh one will, why do you insist on going your own way, abandoning yourself to depravity? Little and was speechless. The Grandmaster staggered back 5 or 6 steps and spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared at Little and in disbelief, but the dragon's roar still refused to let him go. Instead, it grew louder and louder, like a rope slowly tightening around him. He basically could not breathe. A woman's graceful, pleasant voice rang out from behind. I've come to assist you, fellow. It was like the sound of nature in his ears. A noblewoman with long, flowing hair held a pipa carved from green jade. She looked at Little and said, the chant of Devanaga really does live up to its reputation. Come and try out my school of music's wondrous sound, as well. She plucked the strings gently, and there was a clang, cutting through the dragon's roar like a sharp blade. The Grandmaster eased up inside and clasped her hands. Thank you, fellow. I'll play the ambush from 10 sides to liven things up for you all. Kill these 2 demons quickly. The Grandmaster of the School of Music smiled and plucked the strings even more frantically. Her hands left behind a series of blurs as if she had sprouted thousands of hands in that instant. There was the noise of the large strings twanging, the small strings cutting, the cavalry charging forward, and the clang of blades and spears. The invisible music rushed towards Li Qingshan and Little and like an army. Suddenly, there was a flash beside her. Her dress drifted about, and a gloomy voice rang out by her ear. Who do you want to kill? Your Highness. Don't. She raised her head and met the Dark Queen's cold gaze before seeing the myriad ghost banner in her hand. With a wave of the myriad ghost banner, the wails and wails of 10,000 ghosts rang through the grand hall, drowning out the surging music. The army had all been reduced to ghosts. The Grandmaster of the School of Music was sent flying, colliding heavily against the glistening wall. The strings snapped one by one. Dark Queen! The Grandmaster glared at her furiously. Chapter 1069. Mother, Little and said. You don't have to worry. Mother will definitely protect you this time. No matter what you do, Mother will support you with everything she has. Li Qingshan, you've killed that bitch. You've avenged me. I thank you for that too. The Dark Queen looked back at Chu Lai King and said, Xianwei is your daughter. Do you really want to kill her? My Ji clan is well established and flourishing. We have many descendants. We don't lack an unfilial son. Dauntless Abbot, this king has failed to manage the clan properly. I've let down my ancestors, so please don't hold back. Kill these two demons quickly. Shu Lai King recovered his dignity and ordered firmly. All right. Then from today onwards, I no longer have anything to do with your Ji clan. You can kill me too. The Dark Queen waved her hand and summoned a few ghost kings. They roared out fiercely, accompanied by the wails of thousands of ghosts, dyeing the golden hall with a sense of foreboding. The dauntless monk bellowed furiously, "How dare you use underhanded tricks in the holy land of Buddhism? Protector Jalan, world cleansing with the sound of Sanskrit." Above Great Buddha Mountain, a protector of Jalan flickered in and out, producing an obscure, sacred sound of Sanskrit. It was even vaster and more profound than the chant of Devanaga. Jalan was a great protector of Buddhism. The protector deities of all the temples were Main, Sanskrit, Heavenly Drum, Miaotan, Buddha's Slave, and so on. There were a total of 18 deities. Sanskrit Jalan was one of them. The protective formation of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga was called the World Cleansing Formation of Sanskrit. All the bells and drums above and below Great Buddha Mountain rang out together, as if they were accompanying the sound of Sanskrit. They formed a great, golden river that poured into the grand hall. The wails of thousands of ghosts immediately vanished. The roars of the ghost kings immediately turned into miserable cries. Smoke rose up from their bodies as they rapidly shrank. Demons and ghosts had always been suppressed by the Buddhist Dharma. The Dark Queen's expression changed. She also felt a tremendous pressure fall on her. She endured it with difficulty and gritted her teeth. The hell of scorching wind Gu Yenying unleashed was affected slightly too. She thought, fighting on Great Buddha Mountain really isn't a wise choice. The two grandmasters of the School of Fame and Music felt completely at ease. Their bodies submerged in the great, golden river and their wounds rapidly healed up. They sneered at the Dark Queen. It made no difference whether she was present or not today. If you want to die, then to come to die. Mother, don't worry. Qingshan and I will take care of this matter. At this moment, Li Qingshan, kinked to Qing. Kingto to be to Qing. At this moment, Li Qingshan said to Shaoan without even looking back, "Have you learned it?" "I've learned it." Little and nodded and let go of Li Qingshan's hand. Ever since she arrived beside Li Qingshan and stood beside him, they had held hands. This was not to comfort and encourage one another. Instead, Li Qingshan was passing on the 3,000 forms of the sword scripture of heaven and earth to her. Sure enough, she did not disappoint him. "Then come." Li Qingshan laughed aloud and communicated with the wild flower blade soul. "What are you waiting for? Are you really going to use this move?" The wild flower blade soul asked in surprise and doubt. "Why are you suddenly concerned about me?" "I'm just afraid that you won't be able to hold on before you can even launch a single strike and explode. You'll embarrass me. I don't want to end up in the hands of these bald donkeys. You bitch, shut up." Li Qingshan barked. "All right, I'd like to see how you die. One with the blade." The wild flower blade soul was furious. "Thank you for your auspicious words, Madman's End." Li Qingshan laughed out loud. At the end of the wild flower blade's edge suddenly bloomed. Large and enchanting petals wrapped around Li Qingshan's hands. The patterns spread along his arms, and in the blink of an eye, they covered his entire body. They flashed with a faint metallic luster, causing his incomparably handsome face to have an even more sinister and cruel appearance. The figure of the wild flower blade soul was faintly discernible, overlapping with his body and merging into one. Li Qingshan's body trembled violently as he knelt on one knee. The tiger demon's fury had already pushed his potential to the limit, and with the addition of the madman's end, he had broken through his limits, causing an enormous burden. The Vajra pestle took the opportunity to press down heavily, wanting to smash him into powder. However, limits are meant to be broken through in the first place. Li Qingshan laughed maniacally as a sharp light flashed past his eyes. His scarlet hair fluttered like fire, and his phoenix wings suddenly spread open. A gust of wind swept through, displaying an extremely powerful battle stance. Break! With a flash of the saber, the Vajra pestle was broken. The surface of the cut was as smooth as a mirror. What saber is this? The dauntless monk was alarmed. The Vajra had been condensed from the four of their powers through the Guardian King's demon-subduing formation. It was far tougher than regular arcane treasures. Even the famed sword of the Sword Collection Palace could not break it so easily. Break! Li Qingshan's figure spun, and the ending flower saber danced wildly with him. The frenzy contained a profound saber intent, and black cracks spread on the saber's edge, containing the power of the tremor of the ox demon. In an instant, the Vajra demon-subduing formation burst forth with thousands of blade lights, like a wild flower in full bloom. The Vajra demon-subduing formation was broken. The four great Vajras retreated one after another. They had no choice but to retreat. Their unbreakable golden bodies were as weak as paper in the face of the saber light. The saber radiance was like a tornado, whistling as it broke through the hall and the roof. The layer of golden light couldn't stop it at all. Li Qingshan rushed out of the hall. In an instant, the boundless blue sky filled his heart. He looked up at the distant 9 heavens, and a bright smile appeared on his face. It wasn't just his blood that was boiling, but his soul as well. Don't you dare leave, wretched demon. The dauntless monk was both surprised and furious. Originally, he thought it was an impregnable cage, but it could not stop a single slash from his blade. In a daze, he discovered that he had still underestimated his strength. He was powerful enough to rival the 10 demon kings. Li Qingshan looked down and turned around. He gripped the hilt firmly with both hands and suddenly flapped the wings of wind and fire. He merged with the blade and swung down. Great Guardian Palm! The dauntless Guardian King launched a palm strike at the sky, also erupting with resplendent, golden light with the power to subdue demons. Thump! 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 With 3 metallic clangs, the 3 Guardian Kings pressed against him and poured all of their power into him. Golden light suddenly lit up, blazing like the sun. The great Guardian Palm expanded to several times its original size, colliding with the descending blade of light with a rumble. There was a rumble, but it was not as great as he imagined it to be. The blade of light pierced the great Guardian Palm and cut into the Guardian King's avatar, advancing unstoppably, cutting through all obstructions and heading straight for the dauntless monk in the center. Great Guardian will imprint. The dauntless monk brought his palms together and caught the blade. He stared at Li Qingshan in disbelief. You wretched demon. Bald ass. You wretched demon, haven't you said enough? I've put up with you for far too long. Li Qingshan tossed aside the hilt of the blade and threw a punch at the dauntless monk's face. The dauntless Guardian King collapsed loudly, and the dauntless monk was sent flying. He smashed through 2 pillars before smashing through the walls. Chapter 1070. The pillar shattered, slowly falling towards the ground. The building collapsed, and the glazed roof tiles rained down. Sunlight poured in, shining with a rainbow glow. Everyone's expressions of shock froze on their faces. This was unimaginably powerful. Senior brother, the abbot, the unraging monk and the 2 old monks cried out. Don't worry, master. Our abbot's head is still pretty tough. Li Qingshan smiled. Although the dauntless monk had always been a nuisance to him, he was still quite nice to Little, and so he did not kill him. Otherwise, even a demon king with a tough body would only end up with his head exploding if he punched him in the head. You damned disciple. I won't spare you today. The unraging monk said furiously. His demon chi surged with the supreme power of demon suppression, merging with his large, fat body. His fat immediately became knotted muscles, and he became scarlet red like fire as if he had been possessed by the demon of war. However, the banner on his back had the words demon suppression. Li Qingshan only smiled when he heard that. With the 2 words damned disciple, he had not purposefully held back in vain. Boom, boom, boom. The pillars smashed into the ground, and the great hall shook violently. The shattering of the glazed roof tiles filled the air, kicking up dust. The countless Arhat, maidens, and protector generals from the mural surged over together, about to drown Li Qingshan. A river of blood whistled over. The water was dark red and viscous. Countless skeletons moaned and wailed in it, extending their pale white arms. There were even a few powerful ghosts that brandished their claws and fangs, ready to devour people. The Dark Moon. The Dark Queen looked over in surprise, only to see Little and wielding a banner of white bone and blood. He waved it gently, and it actually seemed even better than the sect treasure of the Umbraline sect, the Myriad Ghost Banner. It was the supreme treasure of white bone, the Blood Sea Banner. The sea of blood surged, filled with a deep, filthy aura. Wherever it passed by, the golden Buddhist light would pale in comparison. Whether it was the Arhat, maidens, or protector generals, they would all be swallowed up as soon as they fell in, drowning out the Buddhist kingdom. Only the 8 grotesquely shaped murals could leap out of the sea of blood. At first glance, they all looked somewhat humanoid, but upon closer inspection, they were not human. Some were exceptionally handsome, some had the head of a snake and the body of a human, some were hideous and ferocious, some had 4 arms, and all of them had the power of the 3rd heavenly tribulation. Li Qingshan could tell at a glance that the hideous and ferocious mural was an Azura. Normally, one wouldn't be able to tell, but in the colorful and gorgeous murals, the Arhat and Celestial Maiden were just a foil. Only these 8 were the real protagonists. These were the legendary 8 divisions of the Heavenly Dragon. They were the Heavenly Dragon, the Yiksha, the Gandharv, the Azura, the Garuda, the Kinara, and the Maharaga. They were the 8 types of deities that resembled humans, yet were not. They were all fated with the Dharma, and when the Buddhas preached, they would often attend and listen. The Heavenly Dragon and Dragon were the most important, which was why they were known as the 8 divisions of the Heavenly Dragon. They possessed an extremely important status in Buddhism, which was also the origin of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga's name. The Chan Monastery of Devanaga's supreme technique, the chant of Devanaga, sounded like a dragon's cry, but it actually contained the chanting of celestials. Li Qingshan let out a great laugh. You say I'm a wretched demon, but these 8 are clearly not human either. Aren't they enshrined in the Grand Hall as well? Isn't the chant of Devanaga just imitating the voices of wretched demons? Why are you favoring one over the other? How dare you? How dare you? The 2 old monks bellowed. Damned disciple, the beings of the 8 divisions all admire the Dharma, so they're definitely fated with the Buddha and are enshrined by us. How is that something you can comment on? Said the unraging monk. Master, I'm fated with the Buddha too. The dauntless abbot even said I possess a deep Buddhist nature. After listening to the Dharma of the Zen heart, I even gained a little Zen heart. Unraging, there's no need to waste your breath on him. Hurry up and purge demons and protect the sect. Rationality is undivided, and Buddhahood is one. Fist of Wisdom. A monk king punched out with both fists, forming the fist of the Buddha with both hands. His 10 fingers intertwined, hurling it towards Li Qingshan's back as hard as he could. This was the palm seal of Vairocana of the Vajra realm. It used great wisdom and wisdom to break through the maze, preventing the enemy from escaping. Afterwards, it used the strength of Vajra to crush the enemy. It was the most powerful technique of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. The Sword of Dharma Wisdom. Another monk king raised a sword 5 feet long with both hands. His figure was small and hunched, like a child wielding an adult's weapon, which seemed extremely uncoordinated. However, his expression was naive and simple, filled with sincerity. He bowed deeply and swung his sword towards Li Qingshan's head. He used the final form of the Sword of Dharma right away. The child worships the Buddha. If he were not a true Buddha, then only death awaited him. At the same time, the 8 divisions of spiritual beings struck out together. The sky was peaceful, untainted by dust and dirt. It stood high above like a god, chanting softly. The dragon soared into the air, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, producing a resonant dragon's roar that rang through the clouds. When Li Qingshan heard these 2 sounds, he felt like they had entered his head from his left and right ear respectively. With a rumble, the two sounds combined and became the supreme technique of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, the chant of Devanaga. It was different from the chant of Devanaga of eminent monks. It was more primitive, lacking some of the profound Zen intent. However, it possessed even more wondrous destructive power, making his soul surge. Gandharv was graceful and beautiful. She only wore a white veil, but layers of unpredictable, colorful smoke coiled around her, giving off a heavy fragrance. It was enough to make people dizzy, yet they could not help but want to smell it. It was like a dream. Asura was the most valiant and ferocious. He let out a battle roar and charged over with a weapon in hand, radiating with surging battle intent. He was basically no different from a true Asura king, perhaps even purer. Yaksha was no less vicious than an Asura. He had a green face, sharp fangs, and a pair of horns protruded from his forehead, but he moved swiftly and silently. He unfurled his wings and launched a swift attack. Kinara had a single horn on his head. He sang and danced gracefully, as if he was not fighting, but attending a grand banquet. His steps changed constantly, making it difficult to grasp. He seemed to move slowly, but he arrived before Li Qingshan in the blink of an eye, grabbing towards his throat like he was dancing. Garuda let out a long, sorrowful cry. He unfurled his wings, blotting out the sun. Various solemn colors appeared, and his sharp beak stabbed towards the back of Li Qingshan's head. He was so fast that he struggled to react. Maharaga originally had the head of a snake and the body of a human, but he suddenly turned into a huge, black python. He opened his mouth, which was filled with endless darkness, and swallowed Li Qingshan. Although the 8 tribes of Devanaga were only conjured from a mural, the painter had clearly already comprehended the essence of the 8 tribes. They all possessed divine might, and they worked together with great teamwork. It was enough to rival the combined efforts of 10 great cultivators, and on Great Buddha Mountain, the sound of Sanskrit formation of world purification was several times more powerful. If someone who did not know what was good for them wanted to barge into the Chan monastery of Devanaga, there would be no need for the monks in the monastery to take action at all. Just the colossal mural was enough to make them die here, and just what kind of abilities did the person who could paint a mural like that possess? What of 5 absolutes immortal? Chapter 1071. Bang! Just as Li Qingshan was thinking that, a golden, barefoot foot appeared in front of him, crushing the sea of blood with a single stomp. Even Great Buddha Mountain trembled. The golden, barefoot foot was a calf even thicker than the pillars of the hall. Li Qingshan raised his head and met a pair of benevolent, peaceful, golden faces. His heart shivered. This was the great Buddha that had sat in the grand hall for thousands of years. Time seemed to stop. The great Buddha seemed to stand beyond the river of time. He was clearly just a statue, and his expression did not change at all, but he seemed even more lifelike than the various demigods and semi-devils. He seemed even more lifelike than all the creatures he had seen before. Countless emotions seemed to flow and surge behind the golden Buddha's face. He did not show the slightest bit of arrogance. As a matter of fact, he seemed even more peaceful than mortals, but he was unreachable, overlooking the 6 realms and the 3,000 worlds. The great Buddha had gathered the power of belief from millions of believers, possessing a sliver of true Buddhist nature. Every single movement of his possessed great might, on par with the great guardian king's palm that the 4 monk kings unleashed together. He was even more powerful than the fire god Zhurong that Li Qingshan had once fought. So this is the most powerful existence of the Chan monastery of Devanaga. He's not some reclusive sweeping monk. Instead, he sits right on top of Great Buddha Mountain. Back in our south, even if Qiangqi took action, he probably wouldn't be so powerful. The saying, if a god obstructs us, we'll slay a god. If a Buddha obstructs us, we'll slay a Buddha. That was only the nonsense of mortals. Only by personally witnessing the existence of gods and Buddhas, even if it was only a sliver of will or a sliver of spirituality, could they understand the terror of gods and Buddhas. And the one before him was not a god on the level of fire god Zhurong or demon god Qiongqi either. Instead, he was the ancestor of all Buddhas, the Buddha's Tathagata. Li Qingshan no longer had the strength to care about his surroundings. Only by concentrating all of his willpower could he contend against the Buddhist nature of the great Buddha. The wide, golden Buddha's palm was raised high into the air. It seemed extremely heavy and slow, pressing down slowly towards Li Qingshan's head. The Buddha's palm was only several dozen meters wide, but it gave him the feeling that it was boundless, with nowhere to run. With every inch he pressed down, the pressure on his body multiplied. A cold smile appeared on Chu Liking's face. Even a great cultivator would be smashed to dust by this palm, not to mention the fact that he was surrounded by the demigods, 8 tribes and 2 monk kings. Even in his current position, he was in great danger. The Grand Masters of the Academy also let out a sigh of relief inside. After seeing the dauntless monk knocked away, they no longer had the ambition to purge demons and demons. It would be for the best if the matter could be resolved so easily. Before the Buddha's palm arrived, Garuda's golden beak was already about to peck the back of Li Qingshan's head. A flawless hand stretched out and gently grabbed the golden beak. It was little and she waved her hand, and a string of golden prayer beads flew over. They spun and turned into 33 skulls that let out a strange cackle. Then, they turned into 33 skeletal demons. Pale samadhi flames of white bone burned in their eye sockets, and their bodies were dyed with a layer of golden light, showing a strange posture where Buddha and devil coexisted. Bang! Dang! The wisdom fist imprint and the dharma sword basically struck the 2 skeletal demons at the same time. The skeletal demons were blown away, but they climbed back to their feet with a flip, still cackling. A deep fist imprint and a sword slash appeared on their white bones, but it was not fatal. Skeletal demons did not care about their lives in the first place, and the Buddhist techniques that specialized in suppressing evil in the world did not seem to be particularly effective against skeletal demons. Instead, 2 other skeletal demons used this opportunity to swipe down with their claws and bite with their teeth, forcing the 2 monk kings to retreat and defend themselves. The other skeletal demons all lunged at the 8 tribes' heavenly dragon. The chant of Devanaga was immediately silenced. No matter how vicious the Asura's attacks were, they were unable to kill a skeletal demon whose body was even tougher than an arcane treasure so easily. Gandharv's mysterious fragrance was useless too. No matter how unpredictable the Asura's dance steps were, no matter how swift and silent the Yiksha's movements were, they were unable to avoid the encirclement of over a dozen skeletal demons. Maharaga swallowed 3 skeletal demons in a single gulp, but he immediately began to writhe about in pain. In particular, Garuda, whose beak had been grabbed by Little and had its glowing wings latched onto by 2 skeletal demons. They bit at them viciously, causing its golden feathers to drift about in a mess. Its cries became even more sorrowful. In a single moment, the numbers had been reversed, and it was such a forceful reversal that it left all the cultivators dumbfounded. In particular, the great Grand Master of Moism took the greatest pride in his life from the puppet kings in his possession. Every single puppet king was as powerful as great cultivators, and they did not fear death. However, compared to these skeletal demons, they paled in comparison, and their numbers paled in comparison too. As a result, he immediately suffered a vicious blow. Jin Fugue and Yueyang exchanged glances. They shared similar shock and doubt. Aren't we still in the 9 provinces? A battle, no, a war, on this level was something they had never seen in their lives. The Dark Queen was both surprised and overjoyed, but there was also a hint of melancholy within her pride. She no longer needed her protection. No one could harm her anymore. She sneered at Chu Liking. Do you regret it? The fierce king of Chu couldn't believe that this was his daughter, and he couldn't help but feel a trace of regret. Although the Ji clan was well established and had many descendants, none of them could compare to her, not even Ji Xuanri. If she became king of Chu, perhaps she would be the most powerful king of Chu in history. Coupled with Li Qingshan's cooperation, she might even be able to bring an end to the Southine Kingdom. Perhaps just now, he should not have been so ruthless with his words. However, as soon as the thought appeared, he immediately dismissed it. He was not the type of person to be overly cautious and indecisive. He could no longer go back on what had happened today. The kid from back then has become so terrifying now. Gu Yenying sighed inside. She said to the nearby master of the sword collection palace, "It doesn't matter what you want to do, palace master. Why did you have to provoke them? It won't end well now, will it?" The master of the sword collection palace was currently controlling the heavenly sword to continue attacking the scorching wind hell. When he heard that, his face sank. He also felt rather vexed inside. Just what kind of monsters had he provoked? Originally, dealing with Li Qingshan was a casual move he had made. If he could not achieve his objective, he would just eliminate him. However, he never thought this chess piece would overturn the board in the blink of an eye, almost trying to devour him as the chess player. Everyone shared the same thought. If these two people did not die on Great Buddha Mountain today, was there still anyone in the 9 provinces who could stop them? Li Qingshan suddenly felt his body lighten. It was not because the attacks from the 8 tribes' heavenly dragon and the 2 monk kings had been blocked, but because the golden Buddha's palm above his head had suddenly changed targets, slamming towards Little and instead. The Buddha's eye opened a little more, staring at her. Little and did not block it forcefully. With a gentle shake of the Blood Sea banner, the golden Buddha was sucked into it. The Blood Sea banner had always been a space of its own, and unlike the Azura field, it was specially used for capturing. Attacking with the River of Blood would not be able to demonstrate its true power. Chapter 1072. Before he knew it, the monk king of the 7 treasures had arrived in the grand hall. He stared at Little and furiously as Tathagata of myriad treasures shimmered behind him. He held 7 Buddhist treasures that glowed with rainbow light. He seemed dignified. Originally, he was still thinking about how to take Little and back to the Dragon Province's Lingua Temple, but he never expected something like this to happen. Even when Little and stood beside Li Qingshan when she killed Ji Xuanri, he still held onto a sliver of hope, or perhaps it was a fantasy that there was some inside story behind all of this. His impression of Little and was just too good. Only when the 33 prayer beads that had once defeated him turned into 33 skeleton demons did his fantasy completely shatter. Fury from being deceived and fooled immediately surged into his head. He could not hold it in anymore. Enemy of Buddha? Little An's heart rippled. It made sense, yet there was also some disdain. That's not a bad title, Li Qingshan smiled. Enemy of Buddha, as the name suggested, was an enemy of Buddhism, but not just anyone had the right to be called that. Even the soaring Locust King, who had killed millions and was absolutely irreconcilable with the Chan monastery of Devanaga, did not necessarily have the right, let alone regular demons and monsters. However, the path of white bone and great beauty she used could immediately make these 2 words appear in the minds of all eminent monks of Buddhism. The general principle was to slander the Buddhist Dharma, and the oath was to kill gods and Buddhas. She cultivated it layer by layer just so that the title of Enemy of Buddha would become even more true, until she became the White Bone Bodhisattva. The monk king of the 7 treasures was furious. He no longer said anything else. He drew a circle with his hands and pushed forward forcefully. Demon subduing of the 7 treasures. The 7 Buddhist treasures shot towards Little and with 7 streaks of light. This time, Little and did not have the 33 prayer beads to block it, and the Blood Sea banner surged. Trapping the Buddha for a while was already its limit, and the monk king of the 7 treasures who was on full alert would not be struck so easily by the Buddha slaying sword either. Suddenly, her face became solemn, and inviolable. She chanted softly, "Precept of 4 parts? Precepts." The monk king of the 7 treasures shuddered and became immobilized. He cried out in surprise. This was not a lawyer for lawsuits, but a respectful title that Buddhist disciples used to refer to great cultivators of Vinaya. The Vinaya school was in charge of passing down the laws of Buddhism, and it had great prestige in Buddhism. It could even punish the disciples of other sects and temples. However, because the precepts were too strict and cultivation was too difficult, ordinary Buddhist disciples were unable to endure it. Therefore, There were very few disciples, and lawyers were even rarer. He had never thought that the enemy of Buddha would be a great cultivator. While struggling, he continued to activate the 7 Buddhist treasures. Grandmaster 7 treasures, receive your Buddha. Shaoan waved the blood sea banner. 7 Monk King of Air 7 treasures. Shao King Itjin, King E 7 treasures, Saint, said, what? A, Yang, Buddha. When the 7 Buddhist treasures collided with the Buddha, they were all sent flying. The coral mountain was directly smashed to pieces. He had no time to feel sorry for them because he discovered that he was still unable to move. Buddhist techniques were righteous and dignified and could not be invaded by external evils. The 7 Treasures Monk King, who cultivated the 7 Treasure Sutra, had an extremely powerful will. Originally, he was least afraid of a law incantation like the body-locking curse. However, if there was anything that could restrain Buddhist techniques, it would be the numerous precepts of Vinaya. The precepts protected the laws of Buddhism, so they were originally targeted at Buddhist disciples. Meanwhile, Little and had inherited the relic of the divine nun of the South Sea. Compared to the chant of Devanaga, the precept of 4 parts was closer to the foundation of her cultivation. As a result, the monk king of the 7 treasures could only watch as the Buddha came crashing over. A thought flashed through his mind. She is clearly the enemy of Buddha, so why is her Buddhist technique so profound, even able to transcend 2 great sects? Bang! The monk king of the 7 treasures pressed the side of his face firmly against the Buddha. His limbs spread out in a shape, smashing through an entire wall of the grand hall loudly and falling towards the mountain. From the corner of his eye, he saw an ugly monk with a crooked mouth and slanted eyes leap out from the cliff. His ugly face was also stunned. Bang! Before the monk king of the 7 treasures could even warn him, the Buddha had already collided with the ugly monk. Another thought flashed through his head. That face seems a little familiar. The dauntless monk was sent flying by a punch from Li Qingshan. Although Li Qingshan did not want to kill him, he had not gone easy on him either. He fell off the cliff and only returned to his senses after quite some difficulty. He was both surprised and furious. Ignoring the half-collapsed face, he immediately flew up. Right when he was about to face Li Qingshan in a battle to the death, he saw the great Buddha he had worshipped his entire life fly towards him, with a monk king of the 7 treasures stuck to it. He could not help but become stunned. Although he had not fallen for Little Ant's precepts, Li Qingshan's punch had originally been to cripple him so that he would not run out to cause trouble again. His mind was in turmoil, and his head was spinning, so how could he react? As a result, the great Buddha and the 2 shapes fell towards the mountain together. Abbot, I've been impolite, Little Ant said with an almost undetectable voice. There was no rumble of the Buddha landing below the mountain. With a flash of golden light, the Buddha had already shaken off all his blood. A pair of golden, bare feet stood on Great Buddha Mountain again, radiating with Buddhist light like a rising sun. The Buddha's face was emotionless, but some of its peacefulness had dispersed. It took a step and arrived before Little Ant, slamming down with its palm. Li Qingshan, come and help. Gu Yenian called out from afar. The scorching wind hell was already on the verge of collapse under the attacks of the Heaven-Reliant sword. She could retreat easily, but protecting Hua Sengzan would be difficult. Qingshan, you go. Leave this to me, Little Ant said. All right. Li Qingshan believed in Little Ant's strength and cleverness. Even if he could not emerge victorious, protecting himself was not a problem. His true enemy was not the Chan monastery of Devanaga. He glanced at the master of the Sword Collection Palace, and his eyes brimmed with killing intent. At this moment, a scarlet-red figure blocked his way, wrapped in black chains. The 2 words, demon suppression, drifted behind him. Master, Li Qingshan frowned. This was the opponent he wanted to face the most. He would rather face the great Buddha than become enemies with the unraging monk. Apologies, Qingshan. My skeleton demon can't keep him busy, Little Ant communicated as he dodged the Buddha's huge palm. At the end of the day, the 8 tribes of Devanaga did not possess much intelligence, so they became embroiled in battle with the skeleton demon. The other two monk kings were the same as the seven treasures monk kings, treating little and as their greatest enemy. Only the unraging monk's gaze remained locked onto Li Qingshan the entire time. I've always called you a damned disciple, but I never thought it would come true. Whatever, I better just call you Qingshan. The unraging monk sighed. As long as you like it, Li Qingshan smiled. I didn't think there would be a second time so soon, said the unraging monk. Master, you're not my opponent, Li Qingshan said seriously. Chapter 1073. Li Qingshan felt his chest heat up. As he gazed at the scarlet-red face, he suddenly had no idea what to say. The grand hall slowly collapsed as the majestic chanting echoed endlessly. It was invisible and weightless, but it felt like a mountain pressed down on him. It was like a surging river, constantly slapping and shaking up his soul. He could only suppress it with the spirit turtle. His body was scarlet-red like fire too. Hot blood surged through his thin skin, like a river of magma flowing beneath the surface, ready to surge out and swallow him at any time. Limits were meant to be broken through, and breaking through limits came with a price. He could not last for too long in this state. However, the pain of both internal and external pressure paled in comparison to the hint of guilt in his heart. Just recently, the owner of this face had once used his life to protect him, allowing him to leave the demon suppression tower calmly and allowing him to refine the end wildflower blade. He had always been clear about his debts of gratitude and grievances, yet he owed him far too much. Demon suppression, the unraging monk bellowed out. A huge shadow obscured the sky. The pitch-black demon suppression tower descended from above, as lofty as a mountain. Li Qingshan raised his head. This was the largest demon suppression tower he had ever seen in his life. This was not only because of the unraging monk's extremely high cultivation of the demon suppression statuary, but also because of his extremely powerful demonic nature. Li Qingshan did not dodge. The moment the demon suppression tower descended, he looked at the unraging monk and said, "Master, I might be a demon or a demon, but I'm not a bad person." Boom! Great Buddha Mountain shook, and Li Qingshan's figure vanished from below the demon suppression tower. The unraging monk shuddered inside and clenched his fist. I know. Below the demon suppression tower, Li Qingshan's ears fell silent. The mighty sound of Sanskrit was isolated outside, allowing his agitated soul to calm down. He understood that the unraging monk had done this on purpose. He closed his eyes, but he raised the end wildflower blade. I can't stop here yet. Qingshan, give me some time. The unraging monk's voice rang out. Master, it's useless. Li Qingshan seemed to have guessed what the unraging monk wanted to do. He could not help but shake his head. He gripped the hilt with both hands, but he did not swing down. Don't be angry. This is a good disciple you took in. The scholarly great grandmaster shouted in anger. Master Jew. The unraging monk looked back. Enough nonsense. Hurry up and open the pagoda so we can kill him. Master Jew raised his sword. His face was filled with killing intent. The unraging monk said, I can send him to the Demon Suppression Hall. Demon Suppression Hall, do you still want another soaring locust king? Master Jew interrupted and said with a sneer. North Moon is not the flying locust king. The unraging monk said firmly. He knew there had been many conflicts between the North Moon and the cultivators of the Green Province, but he would never simply believe that it was all one side's fault. Grandmaster Unraging. I know you've always pitted wretched demons, but there definitely won't be a second outcome for what happened today. Yeah, don't ruin the monastery's unblemished reputation over a single misstep. All the great grandmasters gathered around and said. Originally, when Li Qingshan was trapped in the Guardian King's demon-subduing formation, aside from the two great grandmasters of the School of Music and the Famers, the other great grandmasters struggled to interfere. Afterwards, when the Buddha's palms slammed down, they felt like there was no need for them to interfere anymore. Only when Li Qingshan cut through the Guardian King's demon-subduing formation, sent the dauntless monk flying with a punch and little and turned the situation around in a single stroke did the great grandmasters return to their senses. Right when they were about to purge the demon, they were stopped by the demon suppression tower. Gazes shot towards the unraging monk, filled with disdain, ridicule, and criticism. The unraging monk faced them coldly, unfazed. Master Ju said, "Unraging monk, you've been deceived by demons, leading a wolf into your home, resulting in the death of the Ming concubine. That's already a grave sin, yet you still refuse to cooperate with us. Hurry up and kill this demon to redeem yourself. Don't tell me you're still trying to protect this demon. Old bastard, if you hate demons so much, why don't you go slay dragons in the Ink Sea? What are you making so much noise for?" The unraging monk called out. Master Ju was taken aback. He never thought he would be bold enough to retort. "Unraging, stop being so stubborn. Even if he's not a demon, what he's done is still punishable by death. Where's the raging monk who abhorred evil in the past?" Chu Lai King walked over slowly and said sternly, "Why would I tolerate evil and nurture evil? However, there's probably something very suspicious about this place. Otherwise, why would he insist on fighting here if he's not crazy? Even if we want to kill him, we need to get to the bottom of this first." The unraging monk did not trust Li Qingshan blindly. Instead, he found the entire matter to be very unreasonable. Li Qingshan was violent, but he was not a man without brains. There must be a very deep reason why he would go as far as to expose himself and kill the Ming concubine at a time and place like this, even if he was in dire straits. None of the great grandmasters were stupid either. They obviously had their suspicions, but this did not affect their determination to kill Li Qingshan. No matter what the twists and turns were, it was not important at all. Just the fact that a demon king had publicly killed a great cultivator was enough to incite their common hatred for a common enemy. "Don't you forget your identity," Chu Lai King said sternly. No matter how many reasons he had to prove that the Ming concubine deserved to die, he had to kill Li Qingshan no matter what. As a matter of fact, this was no longer a personal grievance, but a conflict between humans and demons. Even if the person Li Qingshan had killed was not the Ming concubine but some other unrelated great cultivator, he still had to lead everyone to kill the North Moon here as the leader of the cultivation community of the Green Province. Is identity even more important than good or evil? The unraging monk bellowed furiously. His scarlet face was rather vicious, as if the Monk of Fury had come back to life. In the past, the Monk of Fury did not care about his identity. He did not care whether they were mortal cultivators, humans, or demons. He would kill the evil and save the good, stubbornly going his own way. In the end, he was surrounded by enemies and condemned by everyone, basically forced into dire straits. He had to rely on the protection of the sect to protect himself. He struggled to calm his anger, almost suffering from chi deviation. "It's been so many years, yet you still don't get it?" Chu Lai King asked. "Yeah, I don't get it. Is it wrong to be benevolent? Is it wrong to punish the evil and promote the good? Is it wrong to be equal?" The unraging monk widened his eyes furiously. "Junior brother." The dauntless monk climbed up Great Buddha Mountain again. The huge, golden Buddha stopped halfway. He had also unleashed his guardian king's avatar to block it, so the impact he received was not particularly severe. His face became even uglier as he stared at the unraging monk in shock. It was like yesterday had replayed itself. The Monk of Fury from the past had questioned him 3 times in the Grand Hall. Perhaps the Monk of Fury had never died. He had just hidden himself beneath Great Buddha Mountain, refusing to let his anger be incited again. Chu Lai King frowned firmly. Teacher Ju said, "Your Majesty, this bastard allied with demons in the past, which is unacceptable to our cultivation community. Now that he's been contaminated by demon chi, he has completely fallen into the demonic path. The Chan Monastery of Devanaga really doesn't know how to choose disciples." With a clang, he drew his sword and pointed it at the unraging monk. "Bald ass, if you still don't open the tower, don't blame my sword for being merciless." Before he had even finished talking, he suddenly took off, rushing towards the demon suppression tower. Everyone else thought he was trying to cut through the demon suppression tower, eager to fight to the death against the North Moon. They praised him inside for his courage. However, Teacher Zhu was frightened. He felt like an invisible force had gripped him. Chapter 1074. The blade in Li Qingshan's right hand smashed through the demon suppression tower. He spread the fingers of his left hand and enveloped Master Zhu, gravity of the earth. At the same time, his scarlet eyes were like a tiger's, filled with malice, the nightmare tiger's demonic eyes. Be careful, fellow. Only then did the Grandmasters realize something was amiss and called out. When they forced the unraging monk to let Li Qingshan out, they also felt at ease suppressing him beneath the tower. Never did they think he would actually be able to capture someone through the demon suppression tower, catching them off guard. Now that they thought about it, just now, Li Qingshan had used this exact move to save Hua Sengzan from the palace master sword. It was not that their memories were bad, but because even Qi practitioners could use a method like retrieving something from thin air. They had never thought it would be an innate ability. Wretched demon. All Master Zhu saw was Li Qingshan's vicious grin rushing towards him, and all of his hairs stood on end. In particular, when he saw the scarlet eyes, he became even more frightened. He thought of the Ming concubine's horrific fate and tried his best to break free and distance himself, but the invisible force was so great that he struggled to resist. It was impossible for him to achieve something that even the myriad poison ancestor could not do in the past. Who knew how many times stronger Li Qingshan was now compared to back then? Oh no. If I'm frightened by this wretched demon and lose my courage, I'll probably be dead for sure. The heart of the world is my heart. Unity of man and nature. Master Zhu let out a great roar and rushed up to receive him. He unleashed the supreme technique of Confucianism, the three strategies of celestial and human, as hard as he could. His scholarly robes fluttered, and he became righteous and impervious to all evil. He broke free from the shock of the nightmare tiger's demonic eyes and no longer showed any fear on his face. He seemed like a gentleman from ancient times, standing between the heavens and the earth. The sword is the weapon of a gentleman. Master Zhu swung his sleeve and raised his sword, swinging it down. The strike was upright and peaceful, dignified and majestic. It did not possess the sharpness of the heavenly Reliance sword, nor the sincerity of the Dharma sword. There was only a sense of magnanimity. He wanted to establish his heart for the world, establish his life for the people, inherit the supreme techniques of the past, and establish peace for all generations. Layer upon layer of sword lights overlapped each other and pressed down towards Li Qingshan, and it was both offensive and defensive without any flaws. Teacher Zhu stood high above the city wall, looking down at Li Qingshan. He was like a scholarly general who could bring peace to the world with his pen and settle the world with his martial prowess. He was preparing to command the three armies and destroy the roving bandits. Everyone eased up inside. They thought, Master Zhu really is a grandmaster of Confucianism after all. The noble sword style has already reached a level of perfection, and it's powered by the three strategies of Celestial, a supreme technique of Confucianism, multiplying its power. The evil warding sword in his hand is no weaker than the 10 famed swords of the Sword Collection Palace. He only needs to hold on for a little longer, and we'll be able to save him in time and kill this wretched demon. Li Qingshan continued to use the gravity field with his left hand as he wielded his saber with his right hand. He did not give off any ferocious aura. In fact, he even seemed to be careless. The saber flashed, the noble sword was broken, and the evil warding sword was broken. Come here. Li Qingshan grabbed Teacher Zhu's head. If your city walls are impregnable, I'll break through them myself, kill my way to the top of the city walls, and capture the commander-in-chief alive. Only then did everyone return to their senses. Immediately, none of their arcane treasures or techniques dared to attack. They were all dumbfounded. How is this possible? Concubine Ming had been killed in a single punch. She could be said to have been caught off guard, having fallen into the wretched demon's trap. However, Teacher Zhu had used his full strength, yet he had been captured so easily by the wretched demon. Only Yueyang had vaguely guessed this outcome. He had personally experienced the power of the Wild Flower Blade soul. The Azura weapon, the Wild Flower Blade, was even sharper than the 10 famed swords, and the blade techniques of the wild flower blade soul were countless times more profound than Teacher Zhu's swordsmanship. The wild flower blade soul was limited by its own strength, so it was unable to unleash its full power. It had almost forced him, a great general king, into dire straits. However, after becoming one with Li Qingshan, it was no longer a blade technique that belonged to the 9 provinces. Instead, it was a blade technique that belonged to the Azura realm. How could Teacher Zhu be Li Qingshan's opponent? Evildoer, how dare you? Teacher Zhu was horrified. A strange vibration spread through his body, causing his bones to crack. He could no longer move, and he could no longer maintain his gentlemanly demeanor. You think you can call me a bald donkey? Li Qingshan roared and slashed down with his blade. Blood splattered. Teacher Zhu suddenly felt his vision split into 2, and he saw his other half. He also saw the shocked faces of the great grandmasters around him. All of this took a long time to describe, but it actually happened in the blink of an eye. Li Qingshan drew, grabbed, shouted, and slashed down with his blade. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Teacher Zhu was beheaded. Everyone suddenly remembered Li Qingshan's words. If you become a ghost under my blade, don't regret it. No, I will not die here. A white nascent soul flew out and hurriedly fled. However, a huge hand followed closely behind, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. You want to leave? Freeze! The great grandmaster shouted in a low voice and used the freeze spell. Li Qingshan's figure paused. Evildoer, don't be so arrogant. Fellow Taoist Zhu, run. The great grandmasters attacked together, using the ultimate techniques of their clans. Li Qingshan shuddered all over. As soon as he broke free from the freezing curse, a vast, boundless field expanded out beside him. He discovered he was currently standing in a sea of golden wheat that reached his waist. A few strands of white clouds drifted through the blue sky as the warm wind kicked up ripples of wheat. The air was scorching yet fresh, which was enough to calm the mind and make people drowsy. An old voice came from the horizon. This is this old man's secret farmland. Fellow Taoists, killing intent is too heavy. Why don't you rest here and enjoy the scenery of the countryside? You are a great cultivator of the agricultural sect. Li Qingshan asked. I'm just an old man plowing the fields. Rain falls from the heavens, and all things awaken. The great grandmaster of the agricultural sect gave an order, and the scenery of the secret farmland suddenly changed. Countless sinister plants drilled out of the earth and rushed at Li Qingshan. This is the so-called countryside scenery? Li Qingshan smiled coldly. You brought about your own destruction, so don't blame others. Fellow Taoists, quickly make your move and slay the demon. Before he finished, the sound of zither strings rang out. In a split second, killing intent soared into the sky, as if thousands of soldiers and horses were attacking. It was the sound of the great grandmaster of the school of music's pipa. Although it wasn't as vast and grand as the Sanskrit chanting, it was as sharp as a sword. It cut through the undulating waves of wheat and slashed at Li Qingshan. The blue sky suddenly darkened. The wind blew, and the clouds gathered. Suddenly, there was the sound of thunder. A Taoist wearing a tall crown and feathered clothes stood in the wind and clouds. He held a peachwood sword in his hand, and lightning coiled around the sword. He drew an arc and pointed it at Li Qingshan. God of thunder, help me. Heavenly thunder, slay the demon. A huge figure formed by interweaving lightning appeared. It had a pair of wings on its back and a sharp mouth and monkey face. Its left hand held a wedge, and its right hand held an awl. The heaven and earth lit up, and a bolt of lightning struck down at Li Qingshan's head. This was the most powerful thunder technique of the school of Taoism. In the past, the patriarch of the 100 schools of thought, Zhou Tong, cultivated this technique. Compared to this great grandmaster of the school of thought, it was like a child playing house. It was as if the god of thunder had descended into the world, enforcing the law on behalf of the heavens, and slaying the demon. If I want to kill him, who can stop me? Chapter 1075. The surging power of tremors was added to the strike. There was a flash of black light, and the garden's secret realm was destroyed. Master, listen to me. Doing good is rarely rewarded. Punishing evil is always met with retribution. Life has never been equal. There are no gods above us. Justice is only within the blade. Li Qingshan took a step out and chanted slowly. Whether it was the vicious plants, the sharp zither music, or even the terrifying lightning, they were all cast behind him. The unraging monk let out a long sigh. It was all in vain. Oh no, fellow Feng is still outside. The Grand Master's expression changed. How is this possible? A withered old man cried out involuntarily. He gazed at Li Qingshan, who had suddenly appeared. His face was filled with disbelief. How could his garden's secret realm be cut open so easily? A domain of its own was an extremely powerful and rare method of cultivation. Even among great cultivators, there were not many who could grasp it. It was most skilled at fending off enemies and trapping them. The master of the Sword Collection Palace's cultivation in the path of the sword had reached the very limits, yet he still failed to get through Gu Yenying's scorching wind hell. The huge, golden Buddha possessed the great power of a god, but it had also been trapped by Little N's Blood Sea Banner for a while. Originally, he thought Li Qingshan would have to do something to break free, and Chu Lai King and the other grandmasters would never give him that opportunity. He never thought he would destroy the garden's secret realm with a single strike. However, little did he know that Li Qingshan possessed the supreme ability, the tremors of the ox demon. Who knew how much space it had smashed through? Even the Mist Province cauldron had been forcefully shattered, let alone his puny domain. The End Wild Flower Blade could already endure the power of tremors. Through the profound blade techniques of the Wild Flower Blade soul, it basically cut through anything. You're the one plowing the fields? A huge black shadow loomed over them and rapidly approached them. A pair of scarlet eyes were like fire. Its scarlet eyes shone like fire as it looked down at the withered old man. Why, the Grand Master of the School of Agriculture, took a step back. His expression changed drastically as he shivered inside. He swung a gleaming hoe as hard as he could at the shadow, but he seemed extremely weak. He had no will to fight at all. The School of Agriculture was not good at fighting in the first place. Even this magic treasure was not used to kill enemies. Since the great swordsman Ming Fei, who wielded a famous sword, was killed with a single punch, how could he have the confidence to fight against Li Qingshan? However, at this moment, apart from him, all the other great grandmasters, including Chu Lai King, were still in the Hall of Great Strength. They were all taken into his farmland mystic realm. The master of the Sword Collection Palace did not seem to have any intention of helping either. He stubbornly attacked the scorching wind hell, as if he really wanted to kill Hua Sengzan at all costs. As a result, this agricultural grandmaster had no choice but to face Li Qingshan alone. He had originally thought that this was his ultimate move to save his life and trap the enemy, but he never expected that he would fall into such an awkward and terrifying situation. As he swung the hoe, he hurriedly withdrew from the garden mystic realm, but there was a time difference. Li Qingshan grabbed the agricultural school grandmaster's neck and lifted her up like he was lifting a chick. He spun her around in his hand, and with her head facing downwards, he threw her down forcefully. Go back to the fields if you're plowing. The grandmaster of the agriculture sect had yet to react. I felt my neck tighten, and then the world seemed to spin around me. I saw a face full of fear reflected on the mirror like gold bricks. It was my face. The face was rapidly enlarging. No. Boom. More than half of his body was stuck in the solid and thick golden bricks of the Hall of Great Strength, leaving only a pair of slightly bumpy legs, struggling in the air. Blood overflowed and flowed on the ground. Just as Li Qingshan was about to deliver another blow, he saw that Teacher Ju's nascent soul was about to fly out of the Hall of Great Strength, while Chu Lai King and the others had already escaped from the mystic realm of farmland. He charged over with a murderous aura, and a bolt of lightning tore through the air. Li Qingshan flapped his wind-fire wings and dodged the lightning strike. Then, he pounced towards Teacher Ju's nascent soul and said, "Old man, I'll spare you this time, but if you dare to come out and court death again, I'll take your life." The two bumpy legs immediately stiffened, standing there without moving at all, like a sprout that had just been planted. The Grandmasters all found this extremely comical, but when they thought about how they would probably suffer the same fate if they ended up in Li Qingshan's hands, how could they laugh? They could not help but think back to the great cultivators who had faced Li Qingshan from the very beginning until now. Concubine Ming had been reduced to a pulp, and even her nascent soul had been directly shattered. The dauntless monk had been sent flying with a single punch, clearly still holding back. Teacher Ju's body had been destroyed, and it seemed like even his nascent soul would struggle to escape. Only this fellow Feng could be considered lucky. Their desire to purge demons and demons could not help but fade slightly. They did not have a fellow disciple they were familiar with who had died to Li Qingshan's hands, nor did they have a grievance as great as Teacher Ju's. Concubine Ming and Ji Xuanri's fates were miserable, but they were not their wives and children after all. If they took such a great risk just for the sake of a demon, it did not seem to be worth it anymore. Just like how no one would actually be foolish enough to purge demons and demons in the Ink Sea, the North Moon did not seem to be much different from the Dragon King of the Sea. However, they were rather caught between a rock and a hard place right now. They could not just watch as Teacher Ju was killed, or what dignity would they have left to remain in the Green Province? And the King Chu had already issued an order, so they could not just ignore it. North Moon, I swear I won't stop until I kill you. Chu Lai King roared furiously and turned into a streak of light, chasing after Li Qingshan. Teacher Ju had been cleaved in half right in front of him, which was already a great humiliation to him. In the blink of an eye, another person had fallen victim to his vicious hands, which was basically like 2 slaps to his face. He was filled with hatred. He gripped a golden seal in his left hand and a tiny cauldron in his right. They were both simple and heavy. However, with the entire world in perspective, there were probably not many people who were faster than Li Qingshan right now. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived before Teacher Ju's soul nascence and reached out with his hand. He smiled viciously. Let's see who can save you this time. Wretched demon, I'll take you down with me. Teacher Ju was rather staunch, blowing up his soul nascence without the slightest hesitation. The unraging monk had already returned to his normal state, but he seemed rather dejected. His efforts were still futile at the end of the day. Suddenly, he saw the great grandmaster of the School of Agriculture stabbed into the ground without moving. His expression became rather strange as he probed. Fellow foam, should I help you out? No. A heavy cry rang out from underground, and his tone eased up slightly. Unraging, master, you don't have to worry about me. I can get out by myself. If you want to worry about me, you better deal with that wretched disciple of yours first. Sigh, I've offended you. The unraging monk said apologetically. As a disciple of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, he obviously could not assist outsiders, but it was impossible for him to assist Chu Lai King and the others in capturing and killing Li Qingshan. Suddenly, he shook his head and returned to the foot of Great Buddha Mountain. Before the demon suppression point, he collapsed on the rock and fell asleep. In the Great Hall, the 2 bowed legs began to move again, but they sank inch by inch until they were completely buried in the ground. Chapter 1076. Li Qingshan's pupils constricted. Time seemed to slow down as the nascent soul's inherent form disintegrated, turning from the shape of an infant into a hazy white sphere. Cracks appeared on the sphere as streaks of dazzling white light shot out. Under Master Ju's final will, it flew towards him rapidly. Under such speed, there was no time to dodge at all. A strong sense of danger surged into his heart. He had used the Tiger Demon's fury and End of the Fanatic at the same time, and his body was already on the verge of collapse. He could not endure another nascent soul explosion. Fellow Zhu. Damn the wretched. The great grandmasters all shouted angrily, but they secretly sighed in relief. They would finally be able to kill this wretched demon this time. Master Ju sacrificed himself for the sake of purging demons. This was enough for the entire cultivation world to remember for 1,000 years. Although Chu Lai King felt rather regretful that he could not personally kill Li Qingshan, he still felt delighted. An idea struck Li Qingshan. He made up his mind and grabbed the nascent soul. The figure of a spirit turtle appeared behind him and suppressed it. The nascent soul immediately stabilized greatly, and the white light that shot out was forcefully suppressed. However, more and more cracks appeared on its surface, ready to explode at any time. Under the shocked gazes of the great grandmasters, Li Qingshan made an extremely bold move. He stuffed the nascent soul into his mouth and swallowed it. The spirit turtle's suppression on the inside was even stronger, but the cracks had already covered the entire surface of the nascent soul. An explosion was already unavoidable. If this continued, he would only be blown to smithereens. Is this wretched demon tired of living? Everyone thought the same thing. However, they saw Li Qingshan suddenly turn around. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened to an unbelievable degree. A dazzling light lit up in his throat. Since he could not completely suppress it, he would just have to find a way to release it. The tiger demon's breath was a furious exhale. What? Chu Liking's expression changed. A dazzling streak of white light whistled out, rushing towards Chu Liking and the others like a mountain torrent bursting out of a dam. As soon as the white light left his mouth, it became unrestrained. It expanded rapidly, taking the shape of a funnel. By the time it reached Chu Liking and the others, it had already blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Li Qingshan even shook his head maliciously, causing the white light to bend and sway, ensuring that the area of attack of this angry breath was large enough. I guarantee that I won't let a bad person go, nor will I let a good person go. The white horse is not a horse, it's hard to tell the truth. The famed great grandmaster level martial sage's expression changed. Then, a hazy figure appeared in the air, looking like a horse but not. It was white yet not white. When the rays of light entered it, they all turned into nothingness, as if they were directly denied by his words. Mechanical War City. The Mahist Great Grandmaster waved his hand and summoned a majestic black city. It was filled with countless black cannon holes and 1,000 cannons. They all fired at the white light. Dazzling heavenly sound. The music school's great grandmaster waved her hands and hurriedly plucked the zither strings. Waves of sound waves were condensed and did not disperse. Instead, they stacked up in front of her. The great grandmasters all used their ultimate defensive techniques. If it was an ordinary nascent soul cultivator, they might be able to resist it. However, this was a nascent soul cultivator's self-destruction. After being restrained by Li Qingshan, the power no longer spread in all directions. Instead, it was restrained and pointed in one direction, increasing its destructive power by more than 10 times. Boom, boom, boom. The white horse was dead. The battle city was broken, and the sound was broken. The great grandmasters were like ordinary people who had been swept into a mountain flood. They couldn't control themselves and were slapped hard on the Great Buddha Mountain. Billions of rays of light splashed and the Great Buddha Mountain shook. The Grand Buddha Hall at the top of the mountain was enveloped in white light. Countless glazed tiles and golden bricks were shattered. Even the Sanskrit world cleansing array couldn't protect the hall that had existed for 10,000 years. It completely collapsed and turned into ashes. Only the fierce king of Chu let out a roar, and a 5-pointed star appeared in front of him. It flickered with 5 different kinds of light and contained the mysterious changes of mutual promotion and restraint. It rotated to resist the impact of the white light and actually went against the flow. Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan wiped his mouth. He didn't have that part anymore. From his neck to his mouth, everything had been melted away by the violent power, revealing his craggy bones. Her fangs intersected and emitted a metallic luster. However, this didn't stop him from revealing a ferocious smile. At some point, the mighty sound of Sanskrit had calmed down and the turbulence in his soul had calmed down. He was full of fighting spirit and swung his last man wildflower saber. Again! Deep in the soil, the great grandmaster of the agricultural school felt the earth tremble. He tried his best to go deeper. Because he was on the Great Buddha Mountain, the soil and rocks were all soaked in Buddhist light, so the speed at which he traveled through the earth was very slow. However, he had the patience. Right now, he just wanted to leave this ghastly place and return to the farmland of his dreams. Although Li Qingshan had said that very rudely, he found it to be very reasonable. Those who plowed the fields should remain in the fields obediently. They should not wander around. Purging demons or upholding justice was not something an old farmer like him should be doing. Although he might be mocked by his fellow cultivators for fleeing in the face of battle, plowing the fields had never been something glorious. If he were competitive, he would have never chosen the agricultural school in the first place, much less reach his current realm of cultivation. Only when he reached the depths of the earth and entered the crisscrossing underground caverns of the Green Province did his withered face smile. He could finally use the earth escape technique at full strength. He sat on a rock and took out a tobacco pipe happily. He took a great drag and even blew out a few smoke rings. He had grown all of the tobacco in the farmland's secret realm. Not only were they harmless, but they were even very spiritual. Regular people would become addicted to secondhand smoke. "Old man, let me have a taste." A pair of cold compound eyes lit up in the darkness behind him, and a hoarse voice rang out. "You are." In the Chan monastery of Devanaga, countless monks raised their heads at the top of the mountain in shock. The grand hall had vanished. However, even more people could no longer care about that. A great Buddha was currently rampaging through the monastery, pursuing a tiny, white figure. Boom! The Buddha's palm struck down, reaching several meters deep into the mountain and leaving behind a huge, deep handprint. Large swathes of temples and halls collapsed. Little N was sent flying by the shockwave, basically brushing past the edge of the palm to avoid it. Before she could even catch her breath, there was a flash of golden light from the corner of her eyes, and the Buddha's palm struck out again. She was unable to dodge anymore. Bang! Her bones shattered and scattered, and the samadhi flames of white bone were extinguished with a flash. The strange cackling came to a halt, and a skeleton demon was smashed to pieces. Its body that was even tougher than arcane treasures was as fragile as a clay puppet before the Buddha's palm. In the face of danger, Little N summoned a skeleton demon to block the palm strike for her. She used the opportunity to pull away in a hurry. So far, 7 of the 33 skeleton demons had already been destroyed. Only 3 had been destroyed in the chaotic battle against the 2 monk kings and the 8 legions of Heavenly Dragon. The other 4 had all been smashed to pieces by the Buddha's palm strike. The skeleton demons that were on par with great cultivators could only be used to block the great Buddha's blade. Fortunately, the great Buddha did not possess any abilities or techniques, nor did he possess sufficient intelligence, making it very easy for him to predict his movements. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to emerge victorious. Even with that being the case, he was the most powerful opponent she had ever encountered in her life. And this is just a statue. If it were a true Buddha, just what kind of abilities would he possess? If it weren't for the fact that I practice the path of white bone and great beauty, which prevents me from being suppressed by the Buddha's nature, I probably would have fallen into a bitter battle already. Sure enough, killing Buddhas isn't that simple. Little N thought to herself. She held the Buddha-slaying sword in her hand, but she never had the chance to attack. She might be able to injure the great Buddha with a single slash, but if she was struck by a palm strike, the outcome would not be much better than the skeleton demons. If she summoned all the skeleton demons and formed the skeleton demon formation to suppress the great Buddha, she might be able to create an opportunity. However, she did not do that. Apart from the 5 prayer beads she held in her hand, the remaining 21 skeleton demons were all spread out. Under the terrified gazes of the monks, a hideous skeleton demon climbed up a bell tower with great difficulty. Under the assault of the vast sound of Sanskrit, its body trembled violently. Its joints seemed like they would crack at any moment, but it was unable to drown out its strange cackling. Finally, it reached the top and crushed the buzzing bell with a swipe of its claw. The vast sound of Sanskrit weakened slightly. It ignored the monks and lunged towards the next bell tower. This happened above and below Great Buddha Mountain. The skeleton demons charged left and right like there was no one there, shattering countless bells and drums. This happened to be the foundation of the Sanskrit formation of world purification. The 8 tribes had all been annihilated. The 2 monk kings landed at the foot of Great Buddha Mountain feebly. Now, there was no one in the monastery who could stop them anymore. The vast sound of Sanskrit gradually settled down, ensuring that Li Qingshan was no longer suppressed. Now, there's finally a place I can go. It was the place she had wanted to go to ever since she entered the monastery. Bang! Another skeleton demon was smashed to pieces. She did not take another glance at it. Instead, she gazed in a certain direction on Great Buddha Mountain. Just when she was about to fly over, two figures blocked her way. Invincible Buddha. The dauntless monk and the monk kings of the seven treasures stared at Little and furiously. Although they both seemed rather disheveled, they were filled with determination. One used the Guardian King's avatar, while the other used the 5 Buddhist treasures. There were 2 monk kings blocking her way in front, while the great Buddha pressed over from behind and slammed down with another palm strike, immediately forcing her into dire straits. She smiled in an alluring manner. "I've been waiting for you for a very long time." Little and swung the Blood Sea banner without even looking back, sucking the great Buddha into it again. Then she raised her hand. The law of 4 parts? Abstinence. The furious expressions of the 2 monk kings stiffened. They were immobilized. The familiar sight appeared before them once again. Bang! They glanced at each other from the corner of their eyes. They should not have been so close to each other. Rumble. The great Buddha slammed into the side of the mountain, producing a long gully. With a rip, the Blood Sea banner cracked open, and the blood-red color became much fainter. Little and stowed it away and flew towards the forest of pagodas in the monastery. The exquisite pagodas were scattered all over the place, old and new. They consecrated the sarairas left behind by past eminent monks. These were not bones that had survived cremation, but true condensation of power. To be able to be condensed into sarairas, one had to undergo the second heavenly tribulation at the very least. These sarairas were the best resources for the path of white bone and great beauty. Little and brought her palms together and closed her eyes. "Seniors and masters, I'd like to borrow your sarairas." Chapter 1077. The palace master's cunning doesn't seem like something a sword cultivator would do. In the ruined hall, streaks of light flashed through Gu Yannying's eyes. She stared at the palace master deeply. The scorching wind hell was her ultimate technique, but it was definitely not the method of battle she was most skilled in. In terms of cultivation and foundations, it was even more impossible for her to rival this great sword cultivator. Normally, her domain should have been breached a long time ago. Even if it had been cleaved through in a single stroke, she would not have been surprised at all. However, while the palace master's attacks were vicious, he used the most ordinary sword technique of the sword collection palace. As a matter of fact, just now, her domain was clearly on the verge of collapse, and the palace master's sword moves had weakened as well, allowing her to hold on. However, when the hall was destroyed and she tried to force back the streaks of light and leave with Hua Sungzan, the streaks of light had suddenly become resplendent, giving her no chance at all. This was as clear as it could be. The palace master had purposefully held back. Up until now, he, Li Qingshan's great enemy, had instead remained outside the battlefield with ease. He did not have to face the sharp blades and terrifying abilities, and he had even used Hua Sungzan to keep Li Qingshan here. Otherwise, Li Qingshan only needed a single thought and he could take off. No one could stop him. "And what do you know about the way of the sword?" the palace master said coldly. The deaths of concubine Ming and Ji Xuanri did not seem to affect him much. Everyone thinks the sword collection palace is unyielding and resolute, while the umbral insect is full of cunning. Looks like even I can't help but be affected by this false impression. Gu Yannying raised an eyebrow and could not help but sigh. Sword cultivators were one with the sword. No matter what kind of sword intent they possessed, they would often possess a hint of rationality and coldness, as this was the nature of the sword. However, in order to control ghosts, ghost cultivators could not avoid their minds from being affected. Most of the time, they would instead become a little more emotional. The Dark Queen and the Ming Queen were a stark contrast. The difference between yin and yang was like the difference between a man and a woman. The viciousness of a woman was displayed to the fullest in the imperial palace, but all it did was turn her rival in love into a human swine, while the viciousness of a man was enough to bring chaos to the world and kill people. Not only would they not feel ashamed, but they would even say something like, "That's what a man should be like." I've said it before. All the people of the Sword Collection Palace deserve to die. This person deserves to die the most. A gloomy voice rang out. The Dark Queen held the myriad ghost banner and stared at the master of the Sword Collection Palace coldly. The power of the Sanskrit world cleansing array had been greatly reduced by little, and the suppression she felt had lessened a lot. "Your Highness, the Dark Queen sure has foresight." Gu Yenying smiled. As a visitor from the Dragon Province, she did not choose to side with the Ming concubine, which surprised many people. After all, whether it be the duties of the Hawkwolf Guard or their temperament and reputation, the Sword Collection Palace suited them better. "Yenying, let's change the way you address me. I am no longer a princess." The Dark Queen waved the myriad ghost banner, and the wails of 10,000 ghosts rang out. She summoned a few more ghost kings and lunged towards the master of the Sword Collection Palace together. Although she was concerned about Xian Yu's safety, she knew her limits. Even if she went over to help, she would not be able to shake up the Great Buddha. The Ghost Kings probably would not even be able to approach him. She could already tell that if Li Qingshan did not retreat, Xian Yu would not retreat, while Li Qingshan would definitely save her friend and even kill the master of the Sword Collection Palace. As a result, the crux of everything was actually this. The master of the Sword Collection Palace suddenly erupted with resplendent light, falling on the top of Great Buddha like a star. Not only did it shatter the wails of 10,000 ghosts, but even the Ghost Kings all retreated, afraid to approach him. Sure enough, there's still plenty of time in the future. Sister, there's no need to act on impulse. There's still plenty of time in the future. Gu Yenying felt the pressure on her lesson. She turned around and asked, "Isn't the sect master coming to help?" The master of the umbral insect stood with his hands behind his back, standing on the side of the mountain in the distance. This prominent figure of the demonic path of the Green Province paid close attention to the various battles, but he did not follow the King Chu's orders to kill Li Qingshan, nor did he come to deal with his old enemy, the master of the Sword Collection Palace. His attitude was extremely ambiguous. Who knew what he was planning? If he were willing to take action, he would be enough to stop the master of the Sword Collection Palace. "Fellow Gu, I'm an honored guest of the king's estate, while Xian Yu is the future sect master of our Umbraline sect. She's in a dilemma just like Master Dauntless." The master of the Umbral insect snickered, revealing a mouthful of ghastly white teeth, but he did not seem troubled at all. At this moment, Li Qingshan swallowed Master Ju's soul nascence and spat out furiously. White light whistled down. "Hee, another one's dead. What a pity, what a pity. If I could refine a great cultivator's soul nascence into a ghost slave, it would be extremely useful," said the master of the Umbral insect. Gu Yenying's words made the Dark Queen's heart skip a beat. She raised her head and gazed at Chu Lai King's figure in the whistling white light. Now that bitch, concubine Ming, was dead and Crown Prince Xuani had died too. Both the Sword Collection Palace and the Chan Monastery of Devanaga had been weakened. Out of the three great sects of the Green Province, only the Umbral insect remained powerful. With Xian Yu's strength, she was already the best candidate to inherit the position of King Chu. He just could not put up with this, but as long as he could endure this battle, she could slowly persuade him, and there might not be no chance for a change. Perhaps they could even rekindle their past friendship. The grand hall was enveloped in white light. Reversal of the 5 elements, blurring the myriad worlds. With a wave of his hand, Chu Lai King pushed the pentagram before him forward. It suddenly expanded, becoming 10 times, 100 times larger. It revolved above Great Buddha Mountain, making the surroundings distort. Who knew how many times more powerful it was compared to the hasty palm strike he had just now? Li Qingshan seemed to sink into a mirror that constantly changed shape. His limbs would be elongated at times and compressed at other times. Everything before him became grotesque. Only Chu Lai King's figure constantly expanded, like an indomitable god, gazing down at him coldly and dignifiedly. With a flip of his left hand, a golden seal pressed down. For large words were deeply engraved on it, King of Chu's seal. In that moment, Li Qingshan felt like he was under the Buddha's palm again. As the golden seal pressed down, he heard the voices of millions of commoners. There were the cries of the marketplace, the chanting of scholars, and the sobs of children. It encompassed all the sounds in the world. It was meaningless. When they gathered together, it was like a tsunami, blanketing the surroundings. "Die! What a powerful move!" Li Qingshan praised. Just this move alone was enough to compare with the Dragon King of the Sea. If it was an ordinary cultivator, he would have been smashed into minced meat. However, even this praise was twisted and distorted, becoming very strange. His figure expanded against the wind, reaching 10 zhang, 100 zhang, reaching more than 700 zhang. He had transformed into the body of a demon. A pair of iron hooves landed on the top of Great Buddha Mountain, and his palm slapped upward. Boom! The iron hooves sank deeply, and countless cracks spread out on the mountain. If it were not for the Buddha's light that had been soaked in for 10,000 years, it would have collapsed. "You can't kill me with just this kind of move." Li Qingshan's laughter rumbled like thunder. His palms blocked the King of Chu's seal. Endless power surged into his body, and the distorted world returned to normal. Chapter 1078. Rumble. A huge boulder collapsed and rolled down from the top of the mountain with a trail of dust. It smashed through several halls in a row, but it showed no signs of slowing down. Instead, it rolled faster and faster, destroying everything along the way. The monks fled in all directions as if the end of the world had arrived. The Annihilum Lightchan Master arrived in a flash and blocked the boulder. He smashed it to pieces with a palm strike. Raising his head, a pair of hooves stood like pillars that held up the sky, while his pitch-black body seemed to be forged from black metal. Great Buddha Mountain seemed to have grown significantly taller. A mountain had appeared out of nowhere, standing majestically on the Buddha statue. Its wide, magnificent wings were unfurled, like clouds that shrouded the sky, enveloping the mountain. However, what it cast was not a shadow, but whistling winds and dazzling firelight. Great Buddha Mountain was burning. Wretched demon. He struggled to calm his fury. He wanted to stand up and fight to the death, but he knew that he was just a moth flying into a flame. The shockwaves of battle were not something he could endure. The various head monks all took action, blocking the boulders one by one. They were all renowned eminent monks in the Green Province, but right now, all they could do was remove the damage the shockwaves from the battle had caused to the monastery as much as possible. Boom! A bolt of lightning illuminated 500 kilometers, striking Li Qingshan's head. His head tilted slightly, and his entire body became numb. The King of Chu's golden seal pressed down by several meters. Fellow cultivators, use this opportunity to kill this demon. Before the Great Master had even finished speaking, a few puppet kings took off into the air. They were either human or beast, with the largest being the size of a building, while the smallest was only half the size of a regular person. "Heh, you're taking advantage of the situation." Li Qingshan widened his eyes and blew gently. A gust of wind blew over and blew the Taoist Grandmaster away. With a swing of his tiger tail, he swept out with the end of the wild flower blade. The sharp gale swept up the blade aura, sucking in the two puppet kings and immediately reducing them to smithereens, exploding loudly. The sound of the zither drifted over, accompanied by the chanting of the incantation. It made him feel agitated, so he looked over. The Great Master of the School of Music and the Great Master of the School of Fame stood extremely far away. They were afraid to approach him again. Two flies. Li Qingshan turned his head and calmed his mind. His hands released the power of vibration, constantly adjusting the frequency of strength and weakness. It caused the King of Chu's golden seal to resonate violently. The light was being cut down layer by layer. Chu Lai King said, "Commander Jin, General Yu, your cultivation should be higher than this, right?" Jin Fugue and Yu Weiyang looked at each other as if they were talking about killing. The school of music and the school of legalism were no match for the school of military and the school of legalism. However, they had never given it their all. Jin Fugui had always been on good terms with the unraging monk, so he also found this to be very doubtful. Yu Weiyang, on the other hand, had a good impression of Li Qingshan, and because of Han Qiongji, he didn't want to kill him. Originally, he planned on going with the flow and watching Chu Lai King and the others purge demons, but he never thought Li Qingshan would be so powerful, killing Master Ju in front of everyone. Even the School of Agriculture's fellow Feng had disappeared. Chu Lai King had even taken out the King of Chu's golden seal, yet he still struggled to kill him. If he still did not use his full strength, it would be rather inexcusable. Black Cloud Sand Prison. Jin Fugui raised his hands, and a few strands of fine, black sand appeared in his palms. His face no longer had the slightest hint of mediocrity or kindness on it. His face was as dark as a ruthless official's. He raised his hands, and the sand swirled in the air, surging towards Li Qingshan like a black cloud. Li Qingshan turned his head, and a gust of wind whistled over. Originally, he wanted to disperse the black cloud sand, but the black cloud sand constantly surged up, enveloping his surroundings. Even the gust of wind was unable to reach him. When the black sand landed on him, he experienced intense pain that penetrated deep into his soul. He could not help but frown. This was a domain specially used for battle. It was nowhere close to the School of Agriculture's secret realm of farmland. Yu Weiyang's eyes narrowed, and he locked onto the blade that whistled through the air. His tall body crouched down, like a pouncing beast. He pressed against the spear in his hand, and his eyes flashed. The spear pierced through the air, like a black dragon rising from the ground. Clang! The blade and spear collided, and the tip of the spear immediately cracked. Yu Weiyang felt a great force from the blade, pushing him backwards. He said in surprise, "Just a tail possesses so much force?" He made up his mind. How can I, Yu Weiyang, lose to a tail? The muscles on his arms bulged, and he blocked the blade firmly. The whistling gust of wind came to a halt. "Good job, fellow Taoists," the Taoist Grandmaster said. Violent thunder descends from the heavens. The thunder god's shadow suddenly spread its wings and let out a cry that sounded like an eagle or a cow. It released thousands of lightning bolts that bombarded Li Qingshan's body. Li Qingshan's huge body was unable to dodge, and he could only wait to be slaughtered. Under the state of Tiger Demon's fury, he could not use any defensive divine arts and could only rely on his huge body to withstand the attacks. His originally straight waist immediately bent. "These guys are really troublesome. Brat, have you been castrated? They want to kill you. Hurry up and kill them all. Even if they're your fathers, is this the time to show mercy? Do you really think you are invincible?" Frenzied Flower Saber Soul, who had been silent since the start of the battle, suddenly scolded. Li Qingshan's heart shuddered. What happened today was dangerous, but he was not exactly in dire straits. He did not have the resolve to risk his life. Everything had happened because of the Sword Collection Palace, so he did not have much killing intent towards these grandmasters that he did not know. Intentionally or unintentionally, he would always leave some leeway to test out his methods. Originally, he could have killed the Taoist Grandmaster of the School of Agriculture with a single punch, instead of sticking it in the ground as a joke. Originally, he could have killed Master Ju in a single stroke, denying him the opportunity to escape with his soul nascence. He had never felt like Master Ju could harm him in any way. All he hated was his foul mouth. He did not want to kill a single person from the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Even towards Chu Lai King, who was bent on killing him, he could not help but think, he's little An's father. I can't kill him. It was exactly these subtle thoughts that bound his limbs like invisible chains, making all of his abilities and blade styles falter by just a tiny bit. Even if it was a battle between two mortals, if one of them had the determination to kill while the other did not, it was enough to decide the outcome of the battle. The master of the Sword Collection Palace looked up at Li Qingshan, and his face became sterner and sterner. This power did not make sense at all. Even great demon kings with lifespans as long as 10,000 years did not all possess such martial prowess. Do you understand the principle of playing with fire, Palace Master? I'd advise you to return to the Sword Collection Palace quickly. You might be able to keep your life if you rely on the protective sword formation, Gu Yenying said. If he doesn't die today, my Sword Collection Palace will never have a day of peace. Since you can't wait any longer, I'll give you a quick death. The heavenly sword was suddenly raised high into the air, and its glow expanded with a whistle. By the time it slashed down, it had already become a huge sword several hundred meters long, slashing towards Gu Yenying and Wasungzan in the hell of scorching wind. Its final target was Li Qingshan. Chapter 1079. The streak of light was as blue as the sky, as if it had sliced through the sky. It had almost fused with the space there. Before it had even landed, the hell of hot wind began to shatter, revealing Wasungzan. With a white flash, Gu Yenying arrived before him. She faced the streak of light with her jade folding fan as she frowned slightly. Even if she blocked the attack, she would not be able to guarantee that she would not be injured. Just the shockwaves were enough to kill Wasungzan. Suddenly, a black cloud swept over, enveloping them and blocking the streak of light. As it turned out, it was a huge, black hand. Boom! The King of Chu's golden seal pressed down viciously, and Li Qingshan knelt on one knee. The ground caved in and cracked. His muscles bulged as he gritted his teeth, using a single hand and his entire shoulder to support the golden seal. He grabbed the streak of light firmly. Blood dripped from his hand, pouring down like a storm, turning into flames in the air. The streak of light collided with the tiger bone and rumbled like dark thunder. Qingshan! Wasungzan looked over, only to see a smile appear on Li Qingshan's huge, vicious demon face. I'm not dead yet, he said to Gu Yenying. Take him away. Jin Fugui sighed inside. Even a demon was so loyal, willing to risk everything to save his friend. Just how evil could he be? It was not unreasonable for the unraging monk to protect him. In comparison, the master of the Sword Collection Palace's methods did not seem very upright. However, now that he had fallen into a situation like this, his death was certain. With that in mind, the black sand swept out and withdrew its power, while Yu Weiyang withdrew his spear and stood there. From the moment the master of the Sword Collection Palace struck when he was pressed down by the golden seal, there was no longer any suspense in the battle. No matter what they felt, they could only watch him die. Don't die. With a hawk's cry, Gu Yenying grabbed Wasungzan and turned into a fierce gust of wind, flying towards the azure sky. She moved extremely quickly. Elder Hua, are you planning to betray the sect? The master of the Sword Collection Palace's voice traveled into the distance, landing in Wasungzan's ears. His face changed, and the sword on his back thrummed. Suddenly, he drew his sword and swung it at Gu Yenying. He roared vaguely, "Destroy the sword." Gu Yenying's 5 slender fingers on her right hand bent and changed, grabbing the edge of the sword like an eagle's claw. The astral wind collided with the edge of the sword, and sparks flew everywhere. With a ping sound, the edge of the sword broke into pieces and scattered to the ground. Wasungzan spat out a mouthful of blood. He turned his head to take a look, then fainted completely. He was still holding onto the hilt of his sword tightly. Li Qingshan relaxed. The destruction of his natal sword would definitely cause him great harm, but with Gu Yenying looking after him, his life would not be in danger. Courting death. The master of the Sword Collection Palace turned his cold and indifferent gaze back to Li Qingshan. Although many accidents had happened, it was time for him to remove this chess piece. With a turn and a swing of his sword, several huge fingers flew into the air and landed heavily on the ground. He strode forward with composure. The streak of light from the Sword of Reliance brushed past Li Qingshan's arm and landed on his mountainous body. Blood sprayed as a horrific slash extended from his left shoulder all the way to his waist. Blood flowed like a river and was set ablaze. The fierce wind whistled as the tiger tail swung towards the master of the Sword Collection Palace with the wildflower blade of doom. The master of the Sword Collection Palace glanced to the side and swung his sword without even looking back. Clang! The Heavenly Reliance sword collided with the wildflower blade of doom. A wave of sharp force rippled out, shaving off a layer of Great Buddha Mountain. The ruins of the Grand Hall were completely obliterated. In a single moment, the blade and sword clashed over 1,000 times, demonstrating the greatest blade and sword styles in the world. Although Li Qingshan only had a tiger tail, he had comprehended the sword concealment of heaven and earth, so he knew the master of the Sword Collection Palace's sword style like the back of his hand. For a moment, they were evenly matched. Great Buddha Mountain sank layer by layer. Slay! With a flash of lightning, the Grand Master of Taoism flew over. Behind him, the figure of the God of Thunder wielded a wedge in one hand and a awl in the other. He swung it at Li Qingshan's head viciously. Boom! Li Qingshan's head tilted to the side, and a hole appeared in his head. His body shook as well. The King of Chu's golden seal descended another 30 meters, and he bent over deeply. Break! The master of the Sword Collection Palace used this opportunity to swing down. The tiger tail was severed, and the wildflower blade of doom flew into the air. Cornucopia, collect! The eyes of the Grand Master of the School of Miscellany, who had always kept a low profile, suddenly lit up. He leapt forward and tossed out a dark, metal basin. Green light surged out, enveloping the wildflower blade of doom and drawing it into the basin. The cornucopia was the most renowned supreme technique of the School of Miscellany. It specialized in collecting the arcane treasures of the enemy. No matter what the arcane treasure was, it would be difficult to retrieve it once it entered the cornucopia. He had set his eyes on the value of the wildflower blade of doom a long time ago. However, he knew his own limits, so he did not dare to provoke Li Qingshan so easily. He was afraid that he would end up like Concubine Ming and Master Zhu. That would not be worth it at all. Now that he finally had the opportunity, he could not let it go. Myriad Sword Technique. The master of the Sword Collection Palace formed a seal with his hand and pointed at Li Qingshan. The heavenly sword split into 2, then 4, then 8. Thousands of streaks of light formed a river of light, drowning Li Qingshan within. Li Qingshan's bones thrummed. His entire body was covered in blades, covered in slashes. The places that had not been struck were riddled with wounds, revealing his jagged bones. Blood flowed down like tiny rivers. The tiger demon's fury had already reached its limit. His body was collapsing. He had reached the end of his path. Die, wretched demon! Chu Lai King bellowed. He pressed down with both hands, and the golden seal descended heavily. Boom! Great Buddha Mountain shook violently. Li Qingshan shook his head with a smile. Why don't you just kill me? The mountainous body of the demonic god was crushed under the golden seal. In the blink of an eye, the surging demon chi dispersed. The North Moon was dead. Everyone's expressions varied. The Grand Masters seemed to be in some disbelief, but they all let out a sigh of relief. The vicious battle had finally ended. In front of the Demon Suppression Hall, the unraging monk leapt to his feet and gazed at the mountain peak in the distance. His face was furious, and he shattered the tablet beside him with a palm strike. The master of the Sword Collection Palace sheathed his sword. So what if he possessed supreme strength? If he had no sense of propriety and acted on impulse, he would not be able to escape death in the end. Chu Lai King stowed the golden seal away. Great Buddha Mountain shrank by over 30 meters, and even the ruins of the Grand Hall had been completely obliterated. All that was left were the words, King Chu Lai Seal. Rumbles constantly rang out below the mountain as towers collapsed one by one. Little and wandered through the forest of towers, avoiding the pursuit of the Buddhas as he plucked Surairos one by one. The skeleton demons all gathered in the forest of towers as well. They were like a group of diligent farmers, constantly harvesting. They did not seem affected at all. Chu Lai King said, Xianwei, Li Qingshan is already dead. I can still give you a chance, but right now, before he had even finished speaking, a familiar voice rang out, interrupting him. Sorry to disappoint you. That was only the first round. The second round has just begun, but this time, I won't give you any more chances. Then, a loud and clear phoenix cry resounded through the heavens and earth. Flames filled with vitality burned fiercely, shooting into the clouds and turning into a soaring phoenix. Chapter 1080. The magnificent phoenix gazed at Great Buddha Mountain, dyeing the sky a fiery red. The flames in the sky suddenly drew in, condensing to the limit and suddenly blossomed into a ring of fire. At the center of the fire, his scarlet hair drifted in the wind. Li Qingshan stretched lazily. Dying once in a while doesn't feel too bad. He rubbed his neck and rolled his head before waving his hand. Heh, everyone, we meet again. He grinned, revealing his sharp canine teeth. His scarlet eyes were as red as blood. Everyone was dumbfounded. They had no idea how to respond. Then he turned to Little and in the pagoda forest. Give me a moment. I'll be there very soon to help you. Little and smiled. If you still don't come, I'll deal with it myself. That won't do. Li Qingshan looked at his right hand and muttered to himself, is it the heart of slaughter? It won't be that simple. The palace master's face sank. He could vaguely sense that something was off. The current Li Qingshan gave him a sense of danger. He drew his heavenly sword again. Your Majesty, King Chu. Li Qingshan, if I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Chu Lai King swung his sleeve and leapt into the clouds. He sent a palm strike towards Li Qingshan. Reversal of the 5 elements. The world twisted and distorted, and a grand streak of light tore through the air, arriving before Li Qingshan at almost the same time. A second time. Li Qingshan gazed at the sky before lowering his head again and blinking. Final radiance of the setting sun. A still surface of water unfurled, reflecting the mountains and earth. Chu Lai King's eyes narrowed. The reversal of the 5 elements enveloped him in reverse, and the grand streak of light shot back. With a flash, the palace master slashed down viciously on Great Buddha Mountain, leaving behind a slash that was over 300 meters long. What kind of ability is this? Chu Lai King shattered the upside-down world with a single palm strike, but Li Qingshan had already disappeared. A streak of red light brushed past his shoulder, slanting and turning into an arc of light. It swept toward the 2 Grand Masters of the School of Music and the School of Famous Masters and warned loudly, fellow Taoists, be careful. Both of them turned pale with fright. The Great Master of the School of Music hurriedly plucked the strings. Before the first note of the zither could be heard, a strong gust of wind blew, and a pair of scarlet eyes appeared in front of him. Li Qingshan snatched the green jade pipa and smashed it on the ground. Freeze! The martial grandmaster's eyes widened as he roared. He pushed his cultivation to the limit and executed the body-locking incantation. However, before he could finish his words, he suddenly found himself unable to move. He saw his frightened face gradually distorting. The smooth surface of the mirror turned into ripples and dissipated. That's awful. Unpleasant to hear. Horrible. Li Qingshan said 3 times in a row and smashed the green jade pipa 3 times. With the first strike, the zither strings were all broken and the head was crushed. With the second strike, his lute cracked and his body was half destroyed. With the third strike, the pipa shattered. The nascent soul flew away. Li Qingshan sucked in a huge breath and swallowed the nascent soul. The spirit turtle pressed down, not giving her the opportunity to blow up her nascent soul at all. He licked his lips. Delicious. The Great Master of the School of Music watched this unfold without moving at all. It was like a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. All he felt was a chill. He wanted to run as far away as possible. The thunderous cries of the people of Li rang out by his ears. Li Qingshan raised his head and looked over. Golden light enveloped him from above. The 4 words, King of Chu's seal, blanketed the surroundings. It was just as unstoppable and unavoidable as before. Rumble. Thousands of bolts of lightning danced about like raging dragons. The Great Master of Taoism bellowed out, Die, wretched demon. Myriad sword technique. The palace master formed a seal with his hand, and the heavens reliance swords split into thousands, forming a sword formation that surrounded Li Qingshan. The sword formation closed in with a whistle and stabbed down together. No matter how powerful your abilities are, how many directions can you block? Once the golden seal falls, the outcome will still be the same. Sir, I'll borrow your body. Li Qingshan casually grabbed with his right hand without even looking back. As soon as the great master of Taoism broke free from the freezing curse, she felt her body being sucked over against her will. Frightened, she struggled desperately to break free. "Eat my blade!" Li Qingshan raised the great master of Taoism and used the night battle's blade concealment form of the 8 directions. Over half of the thousands of bolts of lightning and blades landed on the blade. In just a single moment, the great master of Taoism's body was riddled with holes, almost reduced to dust. She wanted to escape with her nascent soul, but it was sucked firmly into Li Qingshan's right hand. Seeing that there was no way out, she roared out furiously, "I want to die with you." Halfway through her sentence, she discovered that she was rapidly rising up. "Lend me your nascent soul again." Li Qingshan flicked his right hand gently, and the gravitational force suddenly turned into a repulsive force. The nascent soul immediately rose into the air, and the great master of Taoism's shocked and furious face dissolved. Cracks appeared on it, and it shot out with streaks of light. It collided head-on with the king of Chu's golden seal. Boom! The nascent soul exploded, and violent energy whistled through the surroundings, sweeping away all of the lightning swords like it was nothing. The golden seal's descent came to a sudden halt, and it was instead lifted by several dozen meters, losing a layer of golden light. Li Qingshan shielded his eyes with his hand and glanced at it. He clapped his hands. "It's good, Li Qingshan," the palace master called out sternly. Li Qingshan looked back, and anger flashed through his eyes. "One with the sword." The palace master swung his heavenly sword, and an extremely resplendent streak of light suddenly shot out from the top of Great Buddha Mountain. "You're looking to die." Li Qingshan flapped his wings and turned into a scarlet streak of light to receive the streak of light. The palace master rejoiced inside. As long as he could keep him under the golden seal for a while, he would still be able to kill him. The moment the 2 streaks of light were about to collide, Li Qingshan moved several meters away, brushing past the palace master. He tilted his head and sneered, "Idiot." With a boom, Li Qingshan landed on Great Buddha Mountain again and made his way towards the great master of miscellany. "Again! Stop him, sir." The great master of miscellany cried out in surprise. He flew off without any hesitation at all. Obtaining a treasured blade was already a great deal. He did not want to throw his life away at a time like this. Li Qingshan stopped and looked back. All he saw was a flash of cold light and a spear stabbed towards him. The tip of the spear trembled and shone with specks of cold light. It was like a sky full of stars, enveloping his surroundings. It was like a black dragon rising from the ground, piercing and destroying everything. Li Qingshan did not dodge. He did not even look at the tip of the spear. Instead, he stared at the spear-wielding Yueyang indifferently. "Black Cloud Sand Prison." Jin Fugui bellowed out furiously. Black sand blanketed the surroundings, enveloping both Li Qingshan and Yueyang. Within the whistling sand, the tip of the spear stopped before the scarlet eye. It only needed to advance another 3 inches, and it would pierce through Li Qingshan's right eye. Li Qingshan did not move at all. He did not use any abilities to block it either. It was as if he had stopped the tip of the spear with his gaze. "Why didn't you block it?" Yueyang asked. "Why didn't you stab me?" Li Qingshan smiled. Yueyang was speechless. He did not stab the spear, not only because Li Qingshan did not dodge, but also because of Han Qiongji. There was a voice in his mind that repeatedly warned him, "I will die. I will die. I will die." He was not afraid of death, but he did not want to die in vain. "I don't want Qiongji to be sad." Li Qingshan turned around and walked away without looking at Yueyang. The tip of the spear trembled a little. Yueyang maintained the posture of stabbing the spear. After a while, he suddenly let out a long sigh and put away the spear. He cupped his hands towards the sky and said, "Your Majesty, King Chu, please forgive me for not being able to participate in this battle." As Li Qingshan walked through the black sand, he felt the piercing pain that penetrated deep into his soul again. Suddenly, he raised his hand and waved it twice, like an adult chasing away an annoying child. "Piss off." The black sand suddenly receded and swept back into Jin Fugui's hand. He rubbed his nose and smiled bitterly. I'm still your superior after all. Seeing Li Qingshan raise an eyebrow, he could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. He said to Chu Lai King in the sky, Your Majesty, there's something very suspicious here. The Hawkwolf Guard needs to investigate it carefully. Are the two of you still human? Chu Lai King flew into a rage. He was not insulting them, but questioning their position. Yu Woyang closed his eyes and said nothing, but Jin Fugue smiled. I'm the Golden Hawk Commander of Great Xia. Even if you're the ruler of a province and possess great prestige, you have no right to send the two of us to our deaths. Not to mention, we have to die for something so ridiculous. All right, all right, all right. Chu Lai King was utterly furious. With a turn of his body, the encirclement around Li Qingshan had already collapsed. He stared at the figure with drifting, scarlet hair. It was just a single rebirth, yet the power he could unleash was not even as great as right now. He had even lost his weapon, but the feeling he gave off was completely different. It was like he had replaced him, the King of Chu, and everything was under his control. At this moment, the Grand Master of the School of Miscellany had already fled far away. Li Qingshan stood on the edge of the cliff and bellowed out, Why don't you hurry up and get your ass over here? His voice rumbled like thunder, but it did not contain any abilities. Kid, I thought you were dead stupid. With a flash of his blade, he cut through the treasure bowl. The blossoming blade's soul appeared, killing the Grand Master of the School of Miscellany in a single stroke. Chapter 1081. The soul nascence flew away, while the wildflower blade's soul flew towards Li Qingshan. He smiled complacently. Kid, I'll show you what a blade technique looks like. The soul nascence flew less than 5 kilometers before suddenly splitting into two, exploding loudly. Blinding light illuminated 1,000 kilometers as waves of air surged out. Demon Blade. The Grand Master of Taoism could not help but retreat. Another Grandmaster had died on Great Buddha Mountain, and he had died to a blade. The brutality of this battle had completely exceeded his imagination. His determination to purge demons and defend the righteous path was gradually replaced by fear. The figure of the God of Thunder behind him gradually dispersed too. There were no cultivators who did not care about their lives, and the school of Taoism placed great importance on the word longevity. He did not have any direct grievances with Li Qingshan. If he helped out Chu Lai King, then so be it, but betting his life on it was not worth it. Seeing how Jin Fugue and Yu Weiyang had both retreated from the battlefield, he no longer hesitated. He suddenly turned into a streak of lightning and whistled off. He did not even greet Chu Lai King. Chu Lai King's face was as cold as steel. Even if he killed Li Qingshan this time, the authority of the King of Chu's estate would fall apart. Coupled with the deaths of the other honored guests, the losses were basically incalculable, which made him hate Li Qingshan even more. The master of the Umbral Insect continued to watch on from one side. His expression changed constantly, making it difficult to distinguish between joy and worry. Who knew what he was thinking? However, the Dark Queen thought to herself, Xuanyue's support of this Li Qingshan at all costs isn't without reason. The master of the Sword Collection Palace also wanted to retreat. Killing Li Qingshan in a situation like this was already extremely difficult, and he would be in danger of dying instead. He thought, this kid has fallen out with our Sword Collection Palace. It's already a matter of life and death. If I don't kill him here, he'll definitely become a huge problem for our entire Sword Collection Palace. The entire plan will be affected. Now it's finally peaceful, the two of you. It's time for revenge and resentment. Li Qingshan could not be bothered with pursuing them. He casually grabbed the wildflower blade that flew over and stabbed it into the ground beside him. He did not use it. Kid, what are you doing? The wildflower blade's soul was confused. Just watch. Li Qingshan smiled. Every time a phoenix underwent nirvana, it would fuse with the various powers in his body, giving him a feeling of being reborn. And this nirvana rebirth, it also gave him a vague sense of enlightenment in his heart. He had a brand new understanding of the way he fought and himself. You don't want to use a divine weapon? Are you a fool? Quickly pick up your blade and chop them to death. Wildflower Sword Soul shouted in dissatisfaction. Now, even if I pick up a knife, I won't have the killing intent you want. In fact, I don't lack killing intent. I'm not an Azura. I don't need to maintain killing intent all the time. Li Qingshan shook his head. If his killing intent was overwhelming, there was no one he couldn't kill, and there was nothing he couldn't slay. It was true that he could display the demonic tiger's ruthlessness and bloodlust to the extreme and easily kill Teacher Ju and the others, but if he really became like that, he would no longer be him. Moreover, that was far from his strongest form. This was because the tiger demon transformation was only one of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine. It was also because he had a super powerful ability like the tiger demon's fury, which instead made him overly reliant on it. All this time, he had allowed his demonic nature to suppress his divine nature, persevering and fighting for his life. However, the true him knew how to endure, how to hesitate, and how to pity. That did not come from the various changes, but from his heart. He worked so hard to seek power, not to become someone else, nor could he become someone else. I am me, Li Qingshan. In that instant, the incompatible powers of the spirit turtle and phoenix began to gradually merge. Water and fire complemented each other, growing and thriving together. Not only was this a balance between the 2 transformations, but it was also the retreat of his demonic nature and the growth of his divine nature. The various powers in his body merged together, no longer clashing with one another. Immediately, his strength rose to a whole new level. The Wildflower Sword Soul originally wanted to retort, but sensing the change in his presence, he could not help but become speechless. Perhaps the laws of the Azura realm could not be used to evaluate everything in the world. Very soon, Li Qingshan comprehended the 4th innate ability of the phoenix. A powerful life force permeated through his body, reaching his soul. As he had expected, it was still the phoenix's nerva. He counted with his fingers. I can be reborn 4 times like this. Excluding the time when I turned into an egg, that's 3 times. I've died once earlier, which means I can be reborn twice more. He could not help but smile. If the master of the Sword Collection Palace knew about this, he would probably fly away on his sword immediately. He did not even dare to think about killing Li Qingshan twice more. Shu Lai King powered the golden seal again, and it pressed down loudly. The master of the Sword Collection Palace swung the heavenly sword again. There really isn't anything new. Li Qingshan stood with his hands behind his back and raised his head. He did not dodge. It was not a desperate situation, so there was no need for him to use the end of the fanatic. Moreover, he did not feel much anger towards a dead person, so he could toss the tiger demon's fury aside. Since you want to defeat me with strength, I'll show you what true strength is. A bull's moo seemed to come from the depths of Great Buddha Mountain. Li Qingshan's body expanded, reaching 30 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters. It was like history was repeating itself. However, this time, he did not transform into a regular demon god. Instead, he transformed into a colossal ox demon that stood on Great Buddha Mountain. Ox demon transformation, demonification. His body became much smaller, only around 1,000 meters tall. However, he seemed even more stable and indestructible, as if he had become a part of the earth. Boom! Great Buddha Mountain shook violently, and its iron hooves sank deeply. However, even though Chu Lai King used all his strength, he was unable to push the golden seal down even an inch further. He was stunned. He knew the power of the golden seal very well. Even though some of its power had been shaved off by the self-destruction of his nascent soul just now, it could still easily crush a mountain. Li Qingshan raised his left arm high, using a single hand to stop the king of Chu's golden seal. His eyes were silent and peaceful. There was no anger or killing intent, only an unwavering determination. The 4 ox demon abilities had become instinctive. It was as easy as eating and drinking. The strength of the earth provided him with the greatest support. He could use the gravity of the earth freely, turning it into a powerful repulsive force. It became a great aid to him in resisting the king of Chu's golden seal. The ox demon forges its hide caused the thousands of streaks of light to land on his body, only leaving behind a few white marks that vanished in the blink of an eye. It was like scratching an itch. The Sword Collection Palace Master panted slightly. The continuous battle had exhausted him as well. The endless abilities had left him rather exhausted. He even felt a sliver of despair. Just how many more tricks did Li Qingshan have up his sleeves? Tremors of the Ox Demon. A muffled moo rang out, and the earth rumbled like a muffled thunder. Bo! The power of tremors rose up from beneath his feet, gathering in his right hand. He slowly clenched his fingers into a fist and threw a punch at the King of Chu's golden seal. Chapter 1082. Waves of air whistled and swept out like ripples. The scenery and the surroundings twisted, and even the space there trembled. A tremendous, unstoppable force radiated from the golden seal, as well as a powerful tremor. Chu Liking's arm trembled. He actually felt like he could not hold on any longer. His arm suddenly bent and was pushed upwards. He could not help but widen his eyes in disbelief. The seal of the King of Chu was a symbol of royal authority. It had been passed down since the founding of the Kingdom of Chu, gathering the power of faith and belief of millions of citizens. Was there actually someone in the world who could contend against it alone? Moo! The heavy cry that seemed to come from the depths of the earth rang out. Li Qingshan leapt up and threw another punch at the golden seal. Boom! 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 The space shook and the layers of golden light shattered, scattering through the air like a snowstorm. Li Qingshan threw punch after punch at the King of Chu's golden seal. He was like an enraged bull, certain of the enemy before him. He did not know how to retreat. All he could do was advance. Even if he sank into the mud, he would never repent. The unraging monk gazed at the clouds. He had no idea whether to laugh or sigh. When he took him in as his disciple back then, perhaps he had sensed his deep obsession. It was even more resolute than his own. No matter how easily he changed on the surface, his heart never changed. I don't know what path you're taking, but if you want to go, then go. Chu Liking rose up and retreated again and again, as if he was unable to contend against this terrifying obsession. With a series of booms, the golden seal was lifted up again and again. Its golden light dimmed to the limit. Suddenly, with a crack appeared on the Chu character on the King of Chu's seal. Wretched demon, don't you dare. Chu Liking's heart ached, and his expression changed drastically. The golden seal of the King of Chu was basically 100 times more important to him than his ancestral tablets, and it was his life-bound item too. If it was destroyed, it would all be destroyed. Why wouldn't I dare? Why can't I? Shatter. Li Qingshan crossed his fists and raised his arm, unleashing the strength of the Ox Demon and slamming it against the Chu character. Boom! The mountainous seal of King Chu soared 1,000 feet into the air, trembling violently as it emitted a buzzing sound. As Li Qingshan fell down, a happy smile appeared on his face as he saw the crack spreading. Soon, it enveloped the entire King of Chu golden seal. Boom! Countless fragments flew in all directions. Thousands of golden arcs of light trailed behind them like a meteor shower. The indestructible golden seal of King Chu, which had been passed down for thousands of years and had once suppressed Li Qingshan to death, was smashed into pieces just like that. Chu Liking felt as if he had been punched in the chest, and his vision went black. He almost vomited blood. He glared at Li Qingshan. This is retribution. Li Qingshan landed on the ground. He pointed a finger at the sky. Puff! Chu Liking spat out a mouthful of blood. Li Qingshan turned his ox head around and glared at the palace master with his round, ox eyes. Have you had enough? Blood flowed down his back. When he attacked the King of Chu golden seal with his full strength, the palace master used this opportunity to attack desperately as well. By attacking a single point, he barely managed to break through the ox demon forges its hide and deal some damage to him. However, he was nowhere close to being lethal. Wretched demon, I'll spare your life today. The palace master did not hesitate at all. He fused with his sword and turned into a magnificent streak of light, tearing through the air. You've spared me, but I won't spare you. Li Qingshan opened his hand and enveloped the streak of light. Gravity. The streak of light paused as if an invisible rope had been tied to it, pulling it back inch by inch. The master of the Sword Collection Palace was shocked. He immediately experienced Master Ju's predicament. Originally, he was confident his strength was above Master Ju's, enough to break free from the strange ability's pull. However, he never expected all of the Ox Demon's abilities to become even stronger and more powerful after Li Qingshan used the Ox Demon transformation. Even when he used his full strength, he was unable to break free from the invisible pull. Blade, come! Li Qingshan pressed down with his right hand, and the terminus wildflower blade rose into the air, rapidly expanding until it became a huge blade several hundred meters in length. He held it in his black hand, and it shone brightly under the sunlight. There was no ferocious killing intent, no profound saber technique, not even a sharp saber edge. There was only a majestic, heavy, vast, and simple saber slash. The blade swept past, leaving behind a black trajectory. However, in the palace master's eyes, it was the descent of a world of darkness. "Help me, fellow." The palace master communicated, but there was no reply. A sliver of fury flashed through his eyes, and he swung the heavenly sword resolutely. "Hehe, I'll send you on your way." Netherworld finger. The master of the Umbral Sect suddenly extended his hand and pointed a skinny finger at the palace master. "You." The palace master shuddered, and a sinister, ghostly face appeared on his face. Normally, he would not fear an attack like this, but right now, it was like the final straw that broke the camel's back. The heavenly sword rapidly collapsed. "My great plan." He roared out with the last of his strength. "Li Qingshan, you'll never have a good ending." "That doesn't matter at all." Li Qingshan clenched his fists and pressed down forcefully, annihilating the palace master in the dark tremors. Just at this moment, the fierce king of Chu raised a cauldron high. The mouth of the cauldron spewed out thousands of dazzling lights. The mountains and rivers of the Qingzhou spread out endlessly in the sky, enveloping everything, emitting a kind of inhuman majesty. That was the gathering of the laws of heaven and earth. It was the Qingzhou Cauldron, one of the 9 cauldrons in the world. It had a stronger power than the seal of the king of Chu, which gathered the power of faith of the people, but he would rather the Qingzhou Cauldron be destroyed, and not the seal of the king of Chu. This was because not only was the Green Province Cauldron a symbol of authority, but it was also a sign of submission. As a result, Chu Lai King would not use it unless he had no other choice. Normally, he only needed a single golden seal to suppress everything. His eyes were round, and his long hair was disheveled. He was expressionless, but there was an indescribable fury on his face. No one could ignore such a threat. Not even the kings of the 8 provinces, not even the 10 demon kings. However, Li Qingshan only glanced upwards. "You don't want this either?" With that, he strode down Great Buddha Mountain, heading towards the giant Buddha that was pursuing Little N. A hint of struggle appeared on Chu Lai King's face. He was not like Li Qingshan, who was all alone in the world. As the Lord of the Green Province, the King of the Chu Kingdom, he possessed great power, but also great responsibility. The wills and legacies of several dozen kings, as well as countless battles and wars, had laid down the foundation of the Chu Kingdom. If this continued, how was he supposed to defend against the attacks of the Southine Kingdom? He did not want to become the ruler of a destroyed kingdom, so he hesitated. The giant Buddha was focused on pursuing Little, and when it was suddenly enveloped by a huge shadow. A huge hand suddenly fell down, pressing down on the Buddha's head and lifting it up. The Buddha turned around and slammed a palm heavily into Li Qingshan's knee. To be continued. Chapter 1083. Crack! There was the sound of metal shattering. His knees were almost smashed to pieces. Li Qingshan grinned. He grabbed the Buddha's head with both hands and pulled up. His thumbs clasped the Buddha's eyes. His hands released waves of vibrating power that collided with the Buddha's light. Strange sounds rang out. The Buddha waved his golden palm and slapped Li Qingshan's wrist. Crack! His 2 wrist bones shattered at the same time. Li Qingshan held the Buddha's head tightly. He would not let go until his arms were broken. This Buddha is indeed strong. Its body is even stronger than the King Chu's golden seal. I can't destroy it even if I use all my strength. If I were to fight it alone, it would be difficult to defeat it. But unknowingly, the weak but vast Buddha nature had a much smaller influence on him. This was not because of the difference in size. It seemed that the stubbornness of the ox demon was more suited to resist the aura of these superiors than the tiger demon's ferocious and aggressive nature. The tiger demon's heart could still be chaotic, but the ox demon would not repent even if he was trapped in the mud. However, he was not alone. The sun set in the west. The sunlight shone down. A white monk's robe floated up, gilded with a layer of gold and red. A pair of flawless bare feet landed lightly on the Buddha's head. "Buddha, atone for my sins," Little and said in a low voice. He held the Buddha's slaying sword with both hands and stabbed down without hesitation. The white bone sword went straight into the Buddha's head. It was unexpectedly smooth until it did not reach the hilt. Just now, it stopped. The Buddha's powerful body suddenly stopped. A golden Buddha's light shot out from the sword mark on the top of his head. In the blink of an eye, it turned into thousands of light rays. The white monk's robe fluttered violently and was drowned in the vast Buddha's light. At this moment, the Buddha's expressionless face suddenly showed a strange expression. Like a ripple, it spread across his face and disappeared quickly. A pair of Buddha's eyes looked up. Although it was in a blind spot, it clearly saw Little N. Little N's face was emotionless. Pale flames burned in his eyes, but his body was shrouded in golden Buddha's light. For a moment, it was difficult to distinguish between Buddha and demon. He seemed to be filled with reverence towards the Buddha, but there was no lack of determination to kill. The Buddha closed his eyes again and put his palms together, resuming his benevolent expression. The setting sun behind him coincidentally overlapped with the halo behind him. He shone with the sun. The dauntless monk chanted. His face that had originally twisted from anger suddenly became calm and composed. He bowed on the ground deeply and said, "I can of everything. Doff of the Buddha, if I can of this seal, the dauntless." The unraging monk smiled again. It was not a frivolous sneer, but great joy from the bottom of his heart. He prostrated himself on the ground. He said unwaveringly, "Be compassionate, punish evil, and promote good. All living things are equal, and everyone can become Buddha." The 7 treasure monk kings and the other monks all bowed deeply, devoutly chanting all they had comprehended in their lives. Thousands of voices were like rivers returning to the sea, merging into the boundless Buddhist Dharma. It was far more majestic than the chant of Devanaga. The landscape of the Green Province, reflected by the Green Province cauldron in Chu Lai King's hand, suddenly became indifferent. It no longer possessed the great dignity that suppressed everything. The laws of the world became meaningless too. All of the glory belonged to the Buddha. Li Qingshan widened his eyes. The Buddha in his hand that was less than 300 meters in size seemed to grow 1,000,000 times larger, bursting through the world. Gazing down from an indescribable height, it was actually even more resplendent than the sun. There was no need for him to wave his hand. Just his gaze was enough to melt everything. Even if he devoted his entire life to it, he would not be able to climb up to a single toe of the Buddha. His legs that still stood firmly even when his knees were smashed actually felt an urge to bend. This was not because of fear or reverence towards power. Instead, it was like humans discovering the existence of the universe for the first time, realizing that the entire world they believed to be was just a speck of dust hovering in the vast sea of stars. He experienced an indescribable sense of despair. His knees trembled as he gritted his teeth so hard that they shattered. Blood and fire surged and flowed in his mouth, but they were unable to drown out the deep despair. This was even more difficult than being hunted down by the Dragon King of the Sea or being threatened by Cheongqi. None of the dire situations he had encountered in his life could compare to this. Even if he was killed, he would just be destroyed. Yet right now, even his willpower wavered viciously. If he lost control of his mind right now, then he would be done for. However, how was he supposed to contend against it? Everything before him could not even be described as an enemy. The tiger demon's battle intent could not be unleashed. The spirit turtle's longevity was just a blink of an eye, and the phoenix's nobility seemed lowly. All he could rely on was an unreasonable, worthless, and meaningless obsession. A voice of exhortation rang out in his heart again. Remember, do not lower your head to anyone, because you once rode on my back. As a result, he refused to kneel. A while later, the final strand of Buddhist light vanished into the horizon. A crack slid past the Buddha's face, and in the blink of an eye, thousands of cracks spread out. The Buddha's indestructible body shattered and scattered, and the setting sun melted the horizon. The short moment felt as long as a century. Li Qingshan maintained his original posture. His ox face was filled with stubbornness. His body was in the mud, but his heart was in the heavens. The monks were originally worshipping the Buddha, but now that the Buddha had vanished, they seemed to be worshipping him instead. Little and drifted down and widened his eyes. He seemed to vaguely see the existence of another figure, but only when he blinked his eyes again did he realize it was just an illusion. Suddenly, Li Qingshan fell backwards like a mountain had collapsed. With a rumble, he leaned against Great Buddha Mountain. In the deep underground cavern below, the soaring locust king suddenly stood up. Its mouth split open and swallowed half of the agricultural grandmaster's head into its stomach. Demon Chi surged behind it as it muttered to itself with a vicious smile, "If you can't die after killing me once, you'll die after killing me twice." Qingshan, little and arrived beside Li Qingshan. A bunch of trash. The soaring locust king sat down again and turned into a locust the size of a thumb, flying deeper underground. "I'm fine. How are you?" Li Qingshan extended his limbs and gasped for air. His body gradually shrank before returning to normal. A strand of Buddhist nature was enough to suppress his mind, while a strand of charm was enough to sway his mind. Just what kind of monster was Brother Ox up against in the distant nine heavens? Quite the harvest. Little and smiled. Not only had she obtained all the Sariras left behind by the past eminent monks of the Chan monastery of Devanaga, establishing a foundation for her future cultivation, but the final stroke of Buddha slaying had given her no less than the former. She raised her right hand and showed the Buddha slaying sword to Li Qingshan. An additional golden line pierced through the sword, and Li Qingshan could vaguely sense the changes. What a detestable sword. Get away from me. The wildflower's blade soul's voice carried a hint of caution. That truly is an unbelievable existence. Little and said from the bottom of her heart. Half of it was admiration, and the other half was delight. Even Li Qingshan, who was both demonic and divine, was rather confused about what she was feeling. The Dark Queen drifted over. Before she could even say anything, a black cat leapt out from her bosom and landed beside Li Qingshan and Little N. She said in great surprise, "Meow. Big black. Little white. It really is you." Chapter 1084. Li Qingshan and Little N looked at one another and smiled. It sure had been a long time since they had heard these two names. "So you're still alive, and you've even become so powerful. That's fantastic. I don't have to go to the Meow Sea anymore." Xianwei rubbed her chest with her claws and let out a great sigh of relief. She said hesitantly, "Then, do you still treat me as your master, Meow?" "I've never been your master," Li Qingshan said in exasperation, but he still smiled. "Damn it, you really have fallen out with me. Don't forget, I was the one who personally engraved the two words on your head. Otherwise, how could you have come up with such a good name, Meow?" Xianwei leapt onto Li Qingshan's head gracefully and slapped his horn heavily with her claws, reminding him not to forget about this favor. "I was tempted to kill you back then." Li Qingshan stared at the cat's eyes. "Haha, you were angry for quite a long time back then, but didn't you still accept it obediently? Come, call me master again." Xuanyue's furry head stuck out from Li Qingshan's head as she stared at him with her different-colored eyes. "Did you see just how powerful I was earlier?" Li Qingshan rubbed his forehead. "It was very powerful. You became as tall as a mountain and killed all of those despicable guys. You're basically even more powerful than Master," Xianwei said excitedly. "You." The Dark Queen was taken aback. Even she felt some reverence towards the current Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan stood up and pointed at his head. I just happen to be lacking a pet. Can you give this cat to me? Before the Dark Queen could even say anything, Xianwei called out, I'm not your pet. I'm your master. Master. Heh, that's not up to you. Li Qingshan lifted her up. He still remembered how she had kidnapped him to the Dragon Province back then. Mother, little and nodded towards the Dark Queen and said to Chu Lai King in the sky, Father, please stop. Chu Lai King was silent for a while. Xian Yu, do you know that you are the public enemy of all the Buddhists in the world? If anyone wants to kill me, then let them come. I won't hold back against people outside of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Little and shook his head gently. She did not mind adding a few more skull prayer beads. Until today. Even if the left master of the Lingwa temple wanted to kill her, the enemy of Buddha, he would have to think twice. Although the people of Buddhism had no lack of sacrificial spirit, they knew their limits. There would be no suicide attacks. Chu Lai King closed his eyes. He heaved a long sigh. In the cultivation world, the strong were respected, and the opinions of the weak were not needed. Without a doubt, she had embarked on a path that went even further. Compared to that, even the position of King Chu was nothing. Then he gazed at Li Qingshan deeply, unable to hide the hatred in his eyes at all. Li Qingshan, our grievances are as great as the mountains and the seas. We cannot coexist under the same sky. You're not the opponent I want, nor are you my opponent. If you want to hate me, then hate me. However, today's matter isn't that simple. I don't know what the Sword Collection Palace is plotting, but it doesn't matter. Li Qingshan shrugged. When he had the time, he would pay a visit to the Sword Collection Palace again and slaughter the two elders of heaven and earth, as well as remove all the swords on the Sword Collection Peak along the way. Chu Lai King took off. He personally believed he could put up a fight against Li Qingshan, but if he included his own daughter on the side, then there really was no chance of victory at all. If he continued arguing, he would only be asking to be humiliated. As he gazed at the setting sun that sank into the horizon, he suddenly felt a sense of desolation. He knew it would probably be difficult for him to get his revenge. The Dark Queen gazed into the distant horizon and suddenly felt rather sad. Little Anne's voice rang out from beside her. Mother, father is in a bad mood. You should go keep him company. Then you. The Dark Queen was reluctant to part with him. He probably doesn't want to see me right now, Little Anne said. Xianwei, why don't you return to the Umbraline sect with me? You can wait for your mother there too. You've been separated for so many years, so it's best if you spend some time together, said the master of the Umbraline sect. However, his sinister tone really did not match the tender content. Just now, thank you very much. Li Qingshan clasped his hands at the master of the Umbraline sect. Although he was rather disapproving of his actions of watching from the sidelines and wavering with the wind, he did not become enemies with him after all. And if it were not for his finger in the end, there really would have been some trouble once Chu Lai King's Green Province cauldron fell. It was nothing. I should be thanking you more for allowing the Umbraline sect and the Sword Collection Palace to decide a victor, said the master of the Umbraline sect. Under the Dark Queen's earnest gaze, Little Anne nodded in agreement. The Dark Queen smiled, and a lot of her gloominess vanished. I'll be returning very soon. Right when she was about to fly off, a slender hand grabbed her sleeve and turned around. It was a young lady with a crescent moon on her forehead. Xianwei, sorry, I almost forgot about you. Come with me. The Dark Queen was in an extremely good mood, apologizing for once. However, it was rather strange. She basically never revealed her human form before him. There's no need, Master. You've already found the real Xianwei. I don't need to be you or anymore. Xianwei smiled, revealing her sharp canine teeth. You don't have to leave. I will treat you just like before. The Dark Queen was not a person who cared deeply about relationships, but she still developed feelings after spending so many years with him. Xianwei shook her head, and the bells on her neck jingled. The Dark Queen glanced at Li Qingshan and did not try to make him stay any longer. You can come back whenever you want. Little and Li Qingshan had agreed to meet again when the Golden Cicada Spirit King ascended. Then, they would set off for the Umbraline sect. She had benefited quite a lot from this battle, so she just happened to be in need of a peaceful place to cultivate in seclusion, refine the Sariras and repair the skull prayer beads, or perhaps forge another white bone arcane treasure. She did not fear the attacks of Buddhism, but she did not want to be disturbed. Xianwei watched the Dark Queen's figure travel off into the distance until it vanished into the horizon. Just now, she turned around. "Oi, Big Blacko, do you still keep your word?" "Of course not." Li Qingshan rubbed the horns on his head. "Then let's set off." Xianwei pointed in high spirits. "To where?" "The Dragon Province." "That's the south. What does it have to do with Miao?" Xianwei flew into a rage out of embarrassment. "It's fine. Actually, the Mist Province is very nice. The people from the Dragon Province are all very annoying." "Nonsense. Ma Am Nine-Tailed Fox Queen is both meow and powerful. Only a bumpkin demon from the countryside like the Mist Province would like it. You're just a measly demon general, yet you act so recklessly before this demon king." "Whatever, as long as you like it." Li Qingshan wrapped his arm around her waist and unfurled his wings. In the next moment, he had already arrived beyond the clouds. His gaze passed through the clouds and gazed at the undulating mountains. The monks of the monastery were still submerged in the sacred atmosphere, prostrating on the ground and completely ignoring everything around them. If he had never witnessed the boundless Buddhist Dharma, he might have mocked them for their ignorance, but right now, all he could do was sink into his thoughts. The unraging monk sensed something and raised his head. His chubby face was filled with helplessness. Li Qingshan waved goodbye with a smile. Suddenly, he felt a hint of unease, but it vanished in a flash. Chapter 1085. Under the ink-blue sky, the clouds rose and fell one after another. The sun set in the west and the moon rose in the east. It was another cycle of day and night. Li Qingshan slowed down and dismissed all of his abilities. Using the night wind that blew over, he soared freely through the sea of clouds. "So high. Big Blacko, you can already fly so high." Xianwei extended her hand in an attempt to touch the moon. "I'm still far from it." Li Qingshan smiled. With a flap of his wings, he suddenly rose higher and left the sea of clouds far behind. The world suddenly fell silent. Even the sound of the wind gradually faded away. "Stop rising. If we go any higher, it'll be the atmospheric winds," Xianwei said in a hurry. "I'm still far from it." Li Qingshan gazed at the horizon, but he gradually descended. Passing through the sea of clouds, he arrived at the boundless mountains that rose and fell. In the past, they had once passed through the myriad mountains together to go to the Dragon Province, but they stopped at the border. He suddenly pointed at a long, blue line on the horizon. "Look, what's that?" "That's the Ice Sword Cliff." Xuanyue's eyes widened as she watched the blue line rapidly grow larger and higher. In the end, it turned into a towering ice mountain that cut through the mountains from the east to the west. Above it was a long mountain of black clouds, and snow fell from it like goose feathers. The sound of wind and snow rang in her ears again, growing louder and louder. Finally, Li Qingshan stood below the Ice Sword Cliff once more. The iceberg was just as lofty and magnificent as before, but it no longer seemed so insurmountable. The fierce wind ruffled his scarlet hair. Before the snow had even landed on him, it was evaporated by the heat from the phoenix's wings, kicking up white mist. "You want to climb it again?" Xianwei asked in confusion. "No, that's enough. Once is enough." Li Qingshan took a step forward and pressed his hand against the iceberg gently. "Big Blacko, come to the Dragon Province with me. If worst comes to worst, I won't let you be my pet anymore." Xianwei made a rare display of bashfulness. It's not the time yet. Li Qingshan had a kind of understanding in his heart. Perhaps there would never be a time like this. Originally, he wanted to keep her by his side, but he found that the distance between them was even further than when she was brought back to South Hub City. Right now, he could go to South Hub City as he pleased. He could even wander through the Dragon Plain easily and admire the nine-tailed fox queen's beauty, but he could not close the distance between them. It would be futile to ask him to stay. He might as well fulfill her wish. It was time to part. If you don't want to go, then so be it. I'll go myself, Xianyu said hatefully. Her large eyes were somewhat dazed as she stared at his back. Suddenly, the ice sword cliff shook slightly. It was as if an ice giant was shaking its body. Snow and ice filled the sky, and under the illumination of the moonlight, it looked incomparably magnificent. Li Qingshan closed his eyes. As if he was listening to something, he released the power of tremors from his hand, sometimes strong and sometimes weak, undergoing a subtle adjustment. The ice that formed the ice sword cliff was even tougher than steel, and it contained wondrous spiritual energy. It was definitely not formed naturally. Legend had it that the ice sword cliff was formed from a divine sword falling from the sky, but no cultivator had come to break through the ice in search of the sword in all these years. He found it rather strange, but he did not think too much about it. In the past, it was precisely this mountain of ice that blocked his path. Brother Ox had also left here, leaving behind a request from above the heavens. He had entrusted it with far too many feelings and promises. Since this was the beginning of everything, then he would start all over again from here. Resonance. Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes. The power of tremors rippled from his hand, scattering a layer of white ice and revealing a half-transparent layer of blue ice. Then, it spread through the entire ice sword cliff. The power of tremors was not powerful, but it made the ice sword cliff tremble violently. Pieces of ice fell off. Crack! With Li Qingshan's hand as the center, cracks spread out like a spider's web, reaching deep into the ice sword cliff. The more the cracks spread, the larger they became. They were like bolts of black lightning, extending recklessly. Li Qingshan pulled back his hand and turned around. He pulled Xianwei into his arms and kissed her soft lips. Meow. Xianwei widened her eyes and wrapped her arms around his neck tightly, kissing him deeply. In the blink of an eye, ice sword cliff loudly collapsed. With an earth-shaking boom, pieces of Mount Han the size of small mountains poured down in torrents, filling the sky with ice and dust, almost dispersing the dark clouds that hung in the sky all year round, submerging their embracing figures. The dark clouds dispersed, and the ice and dust settled. The bright moon shone. The ice sword cliff had turned into glaciers, displaying various wondrous forms. Under the moonlight, they shone with a magnificent, cold light. The path to the Dragon Province was no longer obstructed. The cold wind blew, refreshing and pleasant. It's time to set off. Li Qingshan rubbed her head, and her cat ears trembled. He was reluctant to let her go. She was so delicate and weak in his arms, which made him feel pity for her. He was worried about her uncertain future, so he tried to persuade her. Why don't you go to the Mist Province? The Banyan Tree King is a good friend of mine. He'll take care of you. None of your business. Xianwei turned him down flatly and pushed Li Qingshan away. She wiped her mouth forcefully and said angrily. She was not as obedient as she seemed. She was very willful. However, who didn't have some willfulness in the cultivation community? Li Qingshan shrugged and imprinted a jade talisman before shoving it into her hand. No matter what danger there is, no matter where I am. Got it. What's that? Xianwei accepted the jade talisman and suddenly pointed into the depths of the glacier. Li Qingshan looked in the direction of her finger. There was a particularly large piece of ice there, standing in the center like a small mountain. There was a white, oval-shaped object in the center. It did not give off any special aura, so he had never noticed it before. Is this the legendary falling divine sword? Li Qingshan was rather curious too. He arrived before the ice mountain and discovered that it was particularly clear, transparent, and extraordinarily tough. There seemed to be a huge cocoon in the ice, constantly radiating with coldness. He tapped the ice gently with his finger, and the ice collapsed, revealing the white cocoon. It was only a few meters tall, but the silk that formed the cocoon was as fine as snow and as translucent as ice. It did not seem like silk at all. His soul sense was unable to penetrate it, nor did it give off any aura of life. Don't be so curious or you'll freeze to death. Li Qingshan grabbed Xuanyue's hand that wanted to touch the cocoon and pressed it against the cocoon. The coldness was so heavy that even he felt bone-chilling. So this was the source of the ice sword cliff? I won't die. Hurry up and see what's inside. If it's a treasure, give me half. I saw it first, Xianwei said. All right, all right. As Li Qing'an spoke, he activated the power of vibration. However, he discovered that the cocoon was abnormally tough, and, unlike ice, it could not be destroyed by resonance. Be careful, don't damage it, Xianwei said anxiously. Li Qingshan unfurled his phoenix wings, burning with raging flames. He flew over 100 meters before enveloping the entire cocoon. The silk melted and turned into gurgling water. Gradually, a figure appeared from the cocoon. Chapter 1086. You can eat them all, Li Qingshan said casually. Until now, he had not sensed any signs of life. No matter who was sealed under the ice sword cliff, it seemed that they had been frozen to death. Eat! Xianyu's eyes widened in dissatisfaction. She looked at the figure in the cocoon that was gradually becoming clearer and began to think seriously. The crimson flames were like burning blood, melting most of the cocoon. A white-haired woman was curled up inside, wearing a white feather robe with fluffy white feathers decorating the edges. Her face was exquisite and cold, like an ice fairy. If it's alive, I can eat it. Li Qingshan smiled and pursed his lips. You like to eat it raw? Xianyu said in surprise. Li Qingshan smiled and did not explain, saying, So it's not the ice sword cliff, but the ice axe cliff. The woman carried an ice axe in her arms. There were many patterns of ice and snow on it, but it was huge and ferocious. It combined the beauty of a work of art and the violence of a weapon, emitting a bone-chilling coldness. Li Qingshan could tell at a glance that this ice axe was no ordinary talisman. It was probably not inferior to the end of the wildflower blade. It might even have a weapon spirit. Meow hee, I picked up an axe. Big Black, give it to me, Xianyu said with a smile. This is not something you can use. Li Qingshan reached out to grab the axe handle and touched the white-haired woman's skin. He found that it was not as stiff as he had imagined, but very delicate and soft. However, it was indeed very cold and seemed to contain pure and powerful spiritual power. He muttered to himself, maybe it really can be eaten. All right, then you can keep it for yourself. I want the axe. Xianyu cheered and jumped. Li Qingshan could not be bothered with her. He wanted to take the ice axe out of the white-haired woman's bosom, but the ice axe seemed to be frozen to her body. If he yanked it away forcefully, probably even her body would be ripped apart. He could not bring himself to do that, so he used the flames of the phoenix to melt the ice. The flames burned and circulated. The white-haired woman was unharmed, and her cold body was also dyed with a touch of warmth. The ice axe in her arms gave off a cold light. Suddenly, her snow-white eyelashes fluttered. She opened her eyes, a pair of white eyes, coldly staring at him. A low growl came from the depths of his throat. Fire. I hate fire. Leaping out of the cocoon, he swung his ice axe at Li Qingshan's head. In a split second, the wind howled. The ice and snow howled angrily, and the bright moon lost its light. He's alive. Xianwei was shocked. She quickly hid behind Li Qingshan. I'd better let her die. Li Qingshan couldn't help but shiver. He raised both of his hands and passed through the snow. His left hand grabbed the axe's edge and pulled lightly, while his right hand grabbed the white-haired woman's throat. Although the power of the axe was not weak, it was nothing compared to the giant palm of the Buddha and the golden seal of Chulai King. The white-haired woman struggled violently, and the ice axe trembled incessantly. In the blink of an eye, Li Qingshan's body was covered with a layer of ice. But ever since he experienced the coldness of the water of the ultimate, this kind of coldness was nothing. Spirit turtle suppresses the seas. Li Qingshan shuddered gently, and the ice around him shattered. A ring of faint blue light enveloped the ice axe and the woman. Both of them fell silent. Kill her, Xianwei called out. She seems to have killed a lot of people in the past 2 days. Li Qingshan shook his head from afar. Just when he was about to strike, a pair of pupils suddenly appeared in the woman's white eyes. Although they were also white, there were translucent patterns in them, shaped like snowflakes. She was slightly confused, reflecting Li Qingshan's figure. She said with an extremely weak voice, "Was it you who saved me?" The voice was definitely different from before. Faint demon qi radiated from her. Although it was also very weak, it was extremely pure. She was a demon king, and a very high cultivation at that. "Who are you?" Li Qingshan was taken aback. He had a vague guess. "Bai Xiaoa." The woman frowned, as if she had just recalled the name with great difficulty. "Then," she said, "or the Frost Feather Moth King." Her confusion gradually receded, replaced by cold pride. 72 Demon Kings. "Oh, I've heard so much about you." Li Qingshan sighed in amazement. So an old monster like this was sealed beneath the Ice Sword Cliff. The 72 Demon Kings he had seen before were all male, apart from the Clam King of Mirage Sea, who was neither male nor female. This was the first time he had seen a female. "Can you put me down first?" Bai Xiaoa tried to turn her neck, but the hand was shockingly strong, and she was in a weakened state. She actually struggled to break free. She sighed inside. "I've been sealed in ice for so many years. Has the demon race produced such a powerful being? You wanted to kill me, your savior, earlier." Li Qingshan had no intention of letting go. "That wasn't me." Bai Xiaoa glanced at the ice axe. "Oh, I understand." Li Qingshan let go. Bai Xiaoa rubbed her neck. Suddenly, her expression changed. She raised the ice axe high into the air again and growled, "Kill." TSK, you've actually been controlled by a weapon soul." Li Qingshan stood with his arms crossed and shook his head. He ignored the incoming ice axe. Both the demon and the axe were in an extremely weakened state. They posed no threat to her at all. "Shut the fuck up." Bai Xiao's expression changed. She swung the ice axe around and struck the ground viciously. With a great boom, the ground cracked open into a great valley. Li Qingshan stood on the edge of the cliff and glanced into the valley. Even the bright moonlight struggled to illuminate the very depths of the valley. There was a new problem on the path from the Green Province to the Dragon Province. He thought, sure enough, a starving camel is still larger than a horse. None of these old monsters are weak. Bai Xiao gripped the ice axe tightly and flew into the air. She inhaled and exhaled the spiritual qi of the world, and a pair of long, pure white wings unfurled behind her. Even the moonlight twisted, gathering around her. She was cold and holy. "You think we can split this up?" Xianwei poked her head out from behind Li Qingshan's shoulder. Li Qingshan shrugged and called out to the sky, "Oi, can I discuss something with you?" With a flash of light, Bai Xiaoa stood before Li Qingshan. She pointed the ice axe at the tip of his nose. "Take back what you just said." "You've saved so many people?" Li Qingshan said. "First of all, I've not been controlled by a weapon soul. You're just a junior, so how do you know the power of a weapon soul?" Towards the end, Bai Xiaoa basically ground her teeth. In order to subdue the divine mystic ice axe, she had paid a heavy price. She could not allow anyone to judge her so casually. "I have a weapon soul too." Li Qingshan drew his dying flower blade and gently pushed aside the divine mystic ice axe. The flower blade's soul roared, "This bitch is pointing her weapon at you, yet you're still not doing anything. Are you a man or not? And that stupid axe. Chop it down." You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.